Jenny. Good. Good evening. Thank you for joining us this Thursday night, and welcome to the City of Dublin Planning and Zoning Commission. You can join the meeting in person here at 5555 Perimeter Drive or access via the live stream on the city's website. We welcome public participation and including public comments on cases. At this time, if you'll please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Beal, I'll turn the time over to you for our roll call.
Ms. Harder,
Present.
Mr. Shanak,
Present.
Mr. Way,
Here.
Mr. Supeluk,
Here.
Ms. Call, Mr. Schneer,
Here.
and Mr. Fishman is excused.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Looking at the agenda for this evening, it does look like we have the documents, but in addition to that, meeting minutes from the October 6th meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the documents and the meeting minutes into the record?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Supeluk. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Shanak,
Yes.
Ms. Harder,
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board when rezoning and platting of properties are under consideration. In other administrative cases, the Planning and Zoning Commission has the final decision-making responsibility. Anyone intending to address the commission on any of these administrative cases must be sworn in. There are no cases tonight eligible for the consent agenda. The meeting minutes, the agenda order is typically determined at the beginning of the meeting by the chair. The rules and regulations of the Planning and Zoning Commission state that no new agenda items are to be introduced after 10:30 p.m. The meeting procedure for reviewing cases this evening will begin with a staff presentation, followed by the opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The commission will have the opportunity to ask questions of both staff and the applicant. The commission will then hear any public comment pertaining to those cases. We ask that all public comment be provided at the podium and each speaker provide their name and address for the record. Please press the button on the microphone to ensure the green light, as you see here, is on prior to speaking. Following public comment, the commission will enter into deliberation on each case prior to rendering any decision as necessary. Anyone intending to address the commission on any administrative cases this evening, we do need to swear you in. So if you wouldn't mind, please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative. And just for crossing T's and dotting I's, if you think you might speak and you think your case might be administrative, we ask that you also stand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this commission? Thank you. This evening, the first case that we have on our agenda is for Dublin Metro Place at 600 Metro Place North, 22-148 CP concept plan. This application is a request for the construction of a 5-story building consisting of approximately 160 residential units. In addition to those units, 7,380 square feet of residential amenities, 4,350 square feet of commercial space, 220 parking spaces, and associated site improvements. The approximately 6.3 acre site is zoned Plan Unit District and is located northwest of the intersection of Metro Place and Upper Metro Place. Mr. Hounshell, welcome this evening, and I'll turn the time over to you. Just one item of order. Mr. Supeluk is recusing himself for this first case, so he will exit. We will invite him back after the case concludes. Mr. Hounshell.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening. Before you tonight is a concept plan for the Dublin Metro Place multifamily development proposal. This is the first step in a three-step process within our plan unit development district. The concept plan is an opportunity for feedback, non-binding feedback. There is no determination made on this application tonight, but the intent is to provide the applicant with direction moving forward regarding their proposal. Because this site requires a rezoning in the future, this would be seen at least 2 more times with the rezoning preliminary development plan and the final development plan before anything were to proceed to any sort of development and construction. So the site is highlighted in yellow on your screen. As stated, it is currently zoned in a planned unit development district. This district is the Waterford Village. The standards for this district does not have development text standards, so it reverts back to suburban office. And within suburban office, residential is currently not a considered or permitted use, hence the reason for a future rezoning for this site. This site did originally hold an event center, which was attached to the DoubleTree, which has since been removed from the site and demolished, I believe, last year. So it is currently vacant with parking lot that connects to this DoubleTree site. You will see to the north of the site, there's an I-270 off-ramp, which is immediately adjacent, as well as some office parks to the east, south, and west. And shown on the screen are some existing conditions of the site. On the left, you'll see this is from the front of the site, from Metro Place North. So this would be as you're entering the site. And on the right, you'll see the rear of the property, which shows the ODOT vegetation and screening, which is, again, not on this property, but would be maintained as is required with ODOT. So this site is located within our Dublin Corporate Area Plan. The Dublin Corporate Area Plan is a portion of our community plan, which has been adopted by City Council. This is a document that is meant to recommend and guide the Commission and Council on future recommendations for development and redevelopment within this area. This is just located within one area of it, the MUR1 Metro Blazer Subdistrict. There are 4 districts in total that stretch all the way down towards Tuttle and all the way up. Actually, would be the northern border of this district. The intent of this area is to revitalize an aging legacy office park. Many of the office parks here were built back in the 70s and are starting to need some rejuvenation. So the goal of this is to encourage a variety of new uses with amenities for workers, hotel visitors, and residents, to utilize open spaces as focal points and usable amenities, and to support ancillary uses such as residential, but also retail and commercial, as key locations to support this office district and continue to help it grow into the future. As stated, this is in the sub-district for Metro Blazer. This was subject to a code amendment back in February this year, where the focus was mostly on the inner ring of Metro Place. But what this district is looking for in terms of uses is office, residential infill on key sites, which is secondary to office, and more of a neighborhood commercial as you go closer towards France Road. So in addition to the community plan, it should be noted that there have been several council and planning and zoning commission discussions surrounding residential and its proximity to 270. In February, as stated, there was the amendment to the Dublin Corporate Area Plan, where council did discuss residential along the interstate. And then in January of this year, there was an application before the board. It'd be the 3 Metro project, which is south of this site, which was another apartment complex where the commission expressed concerns about residential along the interstate and the challenges that accompany that use, including aesthetic and noise with that concept plan. So just to kind of lay the frame of where we've been with these types of uses and how that sets us up tonight. So shown on the screen is the proposed site plan. The site is highlighted in red, the dashed line, just to the north of the existing hotel. So the applicant is proposing a 5-story, 160-unit apartment building based on the acreage of the site and the total units. That comes out to about 47 units per acre for density. This building will have a first floor restaurant along the access drive, which is on the south side of the site. On your screen, it would be to the left of the building is where the site would be accessed, which would lead to a 220 parking space lot located to the rear of the site. This does create opportunities for cross-access with DoubleTree, which is one of the recommendations for site design within the Dublin Corporate Area Plan, and creating a cohesion between adjacent developments. As stated before, and just to reiterate, this does require rezoning. So the board is asked tonight as the first question to identify whether a rezoning would be supported for an apartment use or a multifamily use for this site. To go through some of the architecture and renderings that have been provided, shown on the screen are renderings of the proposed 5-story building. I'll look to the applicant to explain a little bit more of what they're looking to achieve with the aesthetic and character of this building and fitting that into the scope of the existing office legacy park, and also fitting within the Dublin Corporate Area Plan and what are recommended there. Here you can see looking from the east, so this would be from the 270 side. You can see the internal portions of the site where there are amenities for the residents located within the center of the site, which include a pool, which is shown on the left. There's also a dog park within this area for the residents here. And on the right, you can see the south side of the building or the left of the building as per the site plan where the proposed restaurant would be located. So with that, there are 3 questions tonight, with majority of the focus being on the first question, which is the commission supportive of the proposed multifamily use? If the commission is supportive of this use, there are 2 additional questions that do contemplate the conceptual site layout, but also the architectural character and how that fits into this neighborhood. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, our applicants are here to address as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanschel. With this application, we are going to handle questions for both the applicant and staff together. So if you would like to step forward, Mr. Underhill, welcome back.
Good evening, everyone. Long time no see. Aaron Underhill, Underhill and Hodge, 8000 Walton Parkway in New Albany. I'm the attorney for the applicant this evening. Appreciate the opportunity to present an exciting project here. Board Development is the developer of the site that's being proposed here in the project. They have a very good reputation of bringing unique projects to different areas of town, and in particular here, I think they've spent a lot of time. We've been at this for, at least I've been involved for at least 1.5 years now with this, trying to find the right design and layout for the site, and to kind of capitalize on some of the things the corporate area plan is seeking to accomplish. Something as big and bold as that area plan with an area that's largely built out today, it's tough to achieve, and it will take a lot of time. And so these sites that don't have buildings on them, we do have a hotel on this site, and we're partnering with the group that owns the DoubleTree there. But this presents an opportunity to really do a good infill project that is complementary to a lot going on in the area. But repurposing of existing office buildings for this sort of a use is extremely difficult. But on the other hand, creating a critical mass of residents in the area will help drive, I think, some of the other goals of the plan, which are to bring a mix of uses here, such as restaurants and maybe a little bit of entertainment, or things that can be visited in the evening, those sorts of uses. And so right now we've got the first component of that with office buildings that are bringing a lot of people to the area during the daytime. But the key to those sorts of uses is to make sure you can expand the hours of operation and make those sorts of businesses successful by having feet on the street, so to speak, during after hours and after work. So, one example I would give is, and this is not apples to apples by any means, but in New Albany, where they have their village center there, and I happen to live in New Albany, but there's been complaints for years there aren't enough restaurants. Well, that's because there's not enough residential around there, and so they have these apartments they did called Market and Main that are very high end. And in fact, as soon as that was announced, we had Hudson 29 come in, for instance, and there's talk about adding more just to create a vibrancy in the evenings in that area. And that's, while not apples to apples here, it's kind of a similar situation that I can say where they're trying to reach a result where they have this district that provides a lot of opportunity for its residents in the evenings. And in order to do that, you have to have people living nearby that can walk there. The question with mixed use often is, what does it mean? And, you know, more and more these days, I do a lot of zoning work where that can be a vertical mixed use or that can be a horizontal mixed use. I think this is a unique situation in that we're able to provide both. So the project here is providing, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, with over 4,000 square feet of what we hope to be restaurant space, as well as some additional amenity space for the residential portion here. We think having residents here that can frequent a restaurant space like that is going to make it very marketable. We also have the hotel that brings its own, you know, nighttime or evening population, and then of course the offices during the day. So we think there's a very good opportunity here and a strong opportunity to bring something like that to this area and kind of jumpstart that sort of redevelopment. I think that the other thing that we are well aware of is that in Dublin, at least, and in other places, you know, locating residential and multifamily next to major thoroughfares can present its own set of concerns in terms of aesthetics, in terms of noise for the residents, et cetera. So I think our group, and I'm going to have them come up and speak, Brad Parrish in particular, we've done a great job of laying out the site so that we have maximized essentially the distance of this building from the interstate. If you've been out on the site, I just went there before the meeting again. The grading is such in terms of the aesthetic that, you know, we're well below the grade of that highway. And so I think, you know, and with that fairly robust tree stand within the right of way, there's going to be some natural screening there that will really buffer this when, you know, when combined with the distance from the freeway right of way. I think also that, you know, we've taken great care. Well, Brad has taken great care to design this building in a manner that feels like it fits right within the fabric of the Metro Place office park, sort of a modern take on an office building. I mean, I think you may have to take two looks at this if you're a lay person and say, is that an apartment building or is that an office building? So I think Brad's done a great job of kind of towing or straddling the line there of making this a good residential project, but also fitting in within the architectural fabric of the area. Before I turn it over here to the board team, I wanted to mention something about how we envision the zoning going. I know for several years now, there's been talk about adopting a new district that would kind of accommodate redevelopment in this area. Maybe something along the lines of a Bridge Street sort of code, but that hasn't happened yet. I know that I've sat in several meetings while I was waiting for my turn and heard that, you know, that it's understood that PUDs will probably be what happens in the meantime until that gets accomplished. That's quite an undertaking for the city to do. So we would be, in fact, filing for a planned unit development, and this is the first step in this concept plan. But I think that provides a lot of opportunity to, you know, basically create standards that will allow will include the hotel in that PUD, number one, because we're going to be creating some situations where we'll have a property line going through a parking lot, for instance. We'll have shared parking. There'll be some other things, but it gives us maximum flexibility to make sure that we're not deteriorating the legal rights on that hotel piece. But it also gives you a chance as a commission to sort of, for lack of a term, horse trade with us and make sure that what we're committing to is just not in a graphic, but it's in a text and on a piece of paper, and we can look at it 5 years from now and say, hey, that's what we agreed to. Frankly, the PUDs are what I cut my teeth on when I was a lot younger, and PUDs were all we did in Dublin once upon a time. So kind of going back to our roots here, but it worked. You can't argue with the end result in Dublin, and it worked for a long time. I think it'll work here. So with that, I'd like to bring Jeff Fontaine up of Borer. He's going to give you a little bit more of a background on the company and what they've done. We'll bring Brad Parrish up here to talk about the design elements, and then we're really here to hear from you. We realize that, so we'll take your questions at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill.
Good evening. Nice to be here with you all, commission, staff. Appreciate your time and all the time we've spent going through this. As Aaron mentioned, this has been probably over a year's worth of work and investigation in here. And so my name's Jeff Fontaine, as Aaron mentioned. I live at 7551 Balfour Circle here in Dublin. I'm president of BOR and representing our team and our partnership on this endeavor. And so along with me, I have many members of our team, including Lori Steiner, who's also Dublin native of 35 years, worked in our corporate office since 1989, and understands and knows the legacy of this community and what we're trying to achieve here collectively. And synonymous with the BOR name is quality. And one of the reasons why I chose to come here and join this company and this team from Cincinnati 3 years ago was exactly that, was the reputation that they had to be impeccable in everything they did, have quality first focus, and do in what they say they're going to do within the communities that they partnered. And that was very impressive to me as I sought out partnership to join in with. And so with that, what Aaron hit on is, we have been focusing our efforts for many years, for about the last 10 years, on urban infill, multifamily, mid-rise, mixed-use, mid-rise developments throughout Columbus. And historically, this wasn't a type of product that was utilized in this community as often, however, has had a lot of great success and reception throughout the city and throughout communities all throughout our country. And so as we've now been working on this and hearing the adoptive plans, especially for the DCAP area, seeing what's happened with Bridge Park and some of the other community areas we have, we're excited to be bringing our expertise and our focus on quality first and thoughtful development, unique development that has a boutique creation with an artful, crafted mind to it. We really think hard about what our exteriors and what our interiors and what we have the look and feel for each project individually and uniquely. And I think you'll see that with some of the examples we've shared with you in our packet, as well as what you see here in the project today. It's not just a cookie cutter project, it's something that is special and unique to us. And so with that, I'd like to, kind of turn it over to Brad Parrish, him and his team have been longtime partners of ours. We've done numerous projects alongside them. And, their eye for finding a way as an architect to combine owner, municipality, and bonding those units and finding a true unique feel for each location that they work on is what drew us to them, while also having a great eye for efficiency and timeliness. As we all know as developers, we've got to be able to deliver a great product on time, and that's a part of what we love about Brad as well. So with that, I'm going to have Brad come up here and speak more holistically to the details, and we're excited to hear your feedback and answer any other additional questions you have at the end of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you all for your time tonight. Brad Parrish with Archall Architects, 49 East 3rd here in Columbus. We were really excited when BOR came to us to talk about this site in Metro Place. I think it offers some unique challenges in fitting with the office typology that is around. And that was really the catalyst for this design. We wanted to understand that Dublin's wishes regarding residential along the highway and not making it, having a bunch of balconies and residential type scale windows along the freeway. So that was really where we started. We wanted to create sort of building elevations that had an office scale that encompassed sort of the 2-floor banding of the units, being that it's a 5-story building. We also looked at the site plan and really wanted to pull it close to Metro Place North so that the restaurant user on the corner as well as the amenity space could have an interactive patio space out in front and really start to activate this Metro Place North, walk or the sidewalks, for future projects here. We also, from a design, I touched on it. All of our the units where our balconies are sort of more of internal to where the amenity is, and all the outside elevation that are fronting along I-270, tend to be of that residential office scale. Larger windows offering more light into the amenity or into the units of the individual apartments. So we're looking to have high quality materials, having stucco and fiber cement on the building with metal accents around and sort of metal railings. So I think with that, that kind of a bigger overview of the project, and really interested to hear the comment and conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish.
That concludes our presentation. I'm the broken record up here, the first of many steps that this project will go through. You know, the process here works, and so we're looking for early feedback here so that we can come back with a project that moves things along a little further, and we look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill. And as a reminder to the audience, what we'll do is we'll have questions for both staff and the applicant first. Then we will invite the public to participate as desired. And then we will enter into deliberation to answer Mr. Underhill's question about the concept plan. So looking to the commission for questions for either staff or the applicant. Mr. Schneer?
For the applicant, you've obviously been aware of the commission and council's views towards residential facing the outer belt. You're proposing a buffer, but did you consider either not doing residential or moving the residential to a different location on the site? Or, I mean, a lot of planning has gone into this, so I'm just sort of curious how you anticipate addressing it. Or is the position that this is the best we can do on that site?
And it's exactly that. As we've evaluated, you know, from existing uses and what is currently within the office park, there is ample use of the office structures that are existing and availability within that park. And so as we looked at dynamically rethinking what this could be as a part of our community, we really believe that there's a need for a housing product in this location. We've evaluated from a market absorption perspective. We've evaluated from highest and best use. We had several site designs that we evaluated: footprint, structured, non-structured, density counts, and optimized it to be a deliverable product of scale that comes into the community at a approachability point to absorb within the community and not be too large of a unit absorption and density, but also still having enough concentration of mass to, as Aaron mentioned, bring the right amount of activity and cross-functional activity within that community. And so the orientation in different pieces of the building footprint, and as it's oriented towards, you know, a little bit away from the highway and how we've scaled it, we believe optimizes those goals, while obviously understanding there was concerns around that as well.
Thank you.
Looking to the rest of the commission, Mr. Way.
So, Mr. Underhill, if you could, you mentioned PUD, that you were planning on submitting a PUD. Is that just for this site, or were you suggesting that included the hotel also?
Yeah, it's going to include the hotel, but only from the standpoint of, you know, if we were to zone the piece that's going to be redeveloped per se and not the other, I think we'll create some what we call legal nonconformities with that site in terms of setbacks, and we may still be able to park it, but the development plan that was approved there as a part of a PUD many moons ago would essentially be legally nonconforming. That can create a lot of issues on a number of fronts. So to come in and comprehensively rezone it, the intent wouldn't be to add uses over there or anything. It would be more to capture what the existing conditions are.
So is there any plans for the hotel to change in the near future, or is the hotel there to stay for a while? So it would just be part of the PUD, but remain a hotel? And
That's correct.
right. Thank you.
Mr. Chinock.
I have a question for staff. Did you, I might have missed it. Did you look at the green space percentages and require what comparison to what's required and what's?
We have not at this stage, but certainly that's something we look at moving forward. With it being a PUD, there would be additional discussion about what's appropriate with that, as this would be different from residential, where there's different requirements for residential.
Okay. And then for the applicant, did you consider parking garage at all on this site, or is it just, is that?
Yes, that's been studied, and maybe someone can talk about that a little more than I can. Obviously, parking garages are pretty expensive, and all in all, while the density seems high here, the unit count is really not that high for an apartment community, 160 units. I mean, a lot of what you see now are 200, 250 unit complexes. And so the economics just didn't work. And so that's why you see the surface parking.
Thank you, Mr. Chinock. Ms. Harder.
I just had a question when you mentioned floor to ceiling windows and then the noise reduction, and I get stucco and the other elements you're using, but floor to ceiling windows still, is there some thought about that with the 270 approach and the concern of hearing it, hearing noise and traffic and?
Yeah, we would obviously study the specifications of the window that we're selecting. There are, I know a project at the top of 270, on the north side of that, there was a higher noise factor in the window that was specified. So we will look at that as we develop the product.
Yeah, I think with that area, but also when I'm looking at the picture with the foliage on it and the top of the development, is that what I would be seeing from 270 and coming around and so forth?
Yeah, it's really actually, when you're coming over the bridge,
Okay.
Over 270, that's sort of the top corner that you would.
So is your top, the people that are renting from you, are all the apartments exactly the same, or is your top view something that is more inviting than the first floor or second floor?
So the units do stack
Mhm.
vertically, but obviously you can see from this that like this corner, the top two units have a little bit more glass that's fronting towards the highway versus the other.
So would I be paying more for a top, being at the top than lower? I think that's what I was kind of, when we're talking about luxury and,
Yeah,
on
absolutely. And
270.
so typically dynamic pricing from first floor to top floor naturally is going to want to be priced a little bit differently. And again, you may have a different price from a northwest facing view, from a southeast facing view, depending on sunlight, depending on exterior overlooks and different pieces of that. So we dynamically price, and most anybody does in the market as well anymore of how we look at that. But we take each individual unit under consideration for that. Yes.
Okay. And then last question, I'm sorry, is about the windows, back to the windows. When you're along a highway and so forth, you're going to get other kind of elements on your windows. Is there anything that the windows don't last long, or they get like kind of a grungy, or are you needing to keep on upkeep of that? Any concern about windows on that side that could have elements that you need to have cleaned up? Thank you.
I would say with general maintenance on the windows, keeping them the cleaned no, we haven't experienced that at this time.
And just one less addition to that is it's really about the maintenance. Obviously, the quality of window that goes in the first place, but the ongoing maintenance. Being an owner operator that we are, I can tell you our buildings that are on High Street in Short North, our buildings that are in urban infill locations that have adjacent businesses that have sometimes exhaust and output, whether it's food or different things. We routinely have quarterly and different, cleaning that goes out and ensures that those films and different things that exterior elements end up getting cleaned off. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harder. All right. Any final questions from the commission? I just have one more. Mr. Underhill and team, were there other properties in Metro Place area that you were looking at for redevelopment and residential components?
This was a unique opportunity between a strategic partnership of parties that were well aligned with one another. From our sense, we pick our partners very wisely, and with the witness group, who are the current owners of the hotel, seeing what their vision was with the renovation that they've done on the Crown Plaza, and just to mention to a previous comment, that has just recently reopened and is a gorgeous new DoubleTree by Hilton that they've converted that to with great aesthetic, and that's really a long-term vision of theirs to be a long-term operator as well. And that's what we liked about this. While there are other opportunities, those other owners that are within kind of this location and region, many of them are out of market. Some of them that are in market are also in a similar line of business as what we do. And we'd be excited to see what other momentum is created amongst those other users and owners that are here locally. But this one was the one that identified, as we talked about a little bit before, or was mentioned before, an opportunity to quickly get a project going and be a catalytic for what is the overall view of what we're looking at in the rethinking of really the upper metro and metro areas.
So follow-up question to that. You talked about market absorption, unit count, that sort of thing. Is Borer's long-term vision to expand the footprint of residential, whether that's directly in Metroplex or surrounding areas still within the city of Dublin?
We would love the opportunity to do so. I mean, that's what we continue to look at, evaluation of land holdings that are existing within, maybe the family portfolio and or other opportunities that have come about. We can say we've had many sites brought to us over the last several years that maybe just wasn't the right location or our project for our footprint. Again, we typically don't do large scale, kind of repeatable projects that maybe others would do in a residential component. We really kind of take a boutique nature to it. So we're selective at what we look at from a site selection and what kind of infill locations that we'd want to be located in, which has led us to this location. And then from the absorption standpoint, I think that's where we optimized looking at what the right unit count, right numbers were for a project in this location and of sizing and scale too.
Thank you. All right, any final questions from the commission for either staff or for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Underhill. Anyone from the public wish to comment on this particular case? Going once, going twice. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will close the public comment portion of the meeting. This is a non-action item. This is a concept plan. The applicant is here to hear feedback from the commission. Staff has graciously presented us with 3 questions and then the 4th of anything else. So what we'd like to do, Mr. Underhill, if this is acceptable, we will discuss number 1, since everything else kind of hinges on number 1. And then, of course, we will provide other feedback regardless of what number 1 is, if you would like to hear it. So looking to the commission on item number 1, is the commission supportive of the multifamily use in this location? Mr. Schneer, if I could start off with you.
Sure. I think it's a great project, and I think it's just sort of the jumpstart that Metro Center needs. And I applaud the effort, the concept, and the inclusion of residential. It's just where the residential is facing 270. And I appreciate your efforts in attempting to screen that as much as possible. If you could, reorient it. I'd love to see residential there, but if the site could be oriented so that the residential wasn't facing 270, you'd have my wholehearted support for the rest of the project. So I'm not supportive of the multifamily use in that location.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Way.
Also, thanks for coming and thanks for bringing a residential proposal to Metroplex. I think it's something we've been talking about for a while, both as a commission and the city, about, the 1980s suburban office park needs to change, and it needs to be more mixed use, needs to have retail, restaurants, all the things you talked about. And the challenge is you've got a 1980s office park kind of configuration that you have to deal with. And as Mr. Underhill said, it's difficult to work within those old parameters. So I think I struggle with, the right approach, but we don't have a master plan for Metroplex yet that starts to put things in the right place. And, as I look at this and I think, the residential facing onto the internal Loop Street makes perfect sense. The restaurant, that orientation, trying to create that, the Loop Road is kind of the place, but it's that edge to the highway that I really struggle with. And, as I was driving up from downtown on my way home tonight and driving through the Dublin frontage and noticing the nice array of office buildings and landscape, it's, Dublin has a very special edge and it's not very long. That really presents a really good image for the city. You go further to the south, you get into all the residential, you get into sound barriers, which is a real fear of mine when you build residential. All of a sudden, sound barriers pop up. So I think there's a strategy and approach for Metroplex that if we could work towards it would achieve everybody's goals. And so I'm looking at this parcel going, if I could add a building that faced out onto the off-ramp that was maybe a different use, and I had residential then on the inside, that's a concept that I could start to get behind. But just to put residential there in a kind of a freestanding parcel surrounded with surface parking, again, that concept I think is still supporting the 80 office park. I think back to the idea, is there structured parking in this concept? And then thinking more creatively about the hotel and how the hotel could be part of it and part of that configuration. I think there's an opportunity to do something here that is mixed use, and it could be horizontal mixed use, but it could also be vertical mixed use. That could be quite exciting. And I would urge you to start thinking a little bit more creatively about how this site could be developed.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Ms. Harder.
Thank you for presenting this evening. I really appreciate your comments. I think the creativity part is essential. When I was looking at my list, of like what I really like about it, what I don't like about it, there's more likes about the building and what's there, amenities and things like that. But I'm also with my colleagues thinking I really have a hard time with the 270 approach, and that is that's very difficult. And just with all the things that you were mentioning with that, so thank you.
Mr. Chinnock.
Again, I'd echo the comments you've heard, and thank you all for coming in and the effort. It's clear you put a lot of thought into the design of the building, the parcel, and I think you can feel our hesitation basically because I think generally we're supportive of something at Metro Place doing this. And as Mr. Way said, just the master planning is kind of maybe a bigger conversation we all need to have. So I think generally we're all wanting this. We feel that there's a need for it. We've all been to Metro Place and seen that there's a need to liven it up a bit. But I guess my questions around this particular site and doing residential, I'd be a little more in favor of it, the residential. But for me, it's got to be something really special because I know we don't like to use the word precedence, but if we allow something residential to go in this spot, it's got to be really special. It's got to have the green space. It's got to have a great feel to it. And I think you've made a lot of strides to get there, but I think we need to take it to the next level for me to feel good about allowing residential to be here because I don't think there's enough green space. I think there's a little bit again, maybe the best way to say it is it's got to be something special. I know in the text we talked about vibrancy, engagement. I just don't feel that we're quite there yet, and I know it's preliminary. I know we're kind of working towards it, but for us to move forward, I think that this would really need to be something a little different. Maybe it's combined with a hotel or some other office, again, a mixed use. But again, I think there's a lot of potential here. But I think we need to just kind of take it to the next level for us to get behind it.
Thank you, Mr. Chinnock. Mr. Parrish, I have to tip my hat. This is one of the most unresidential looking residential buildings I think I've ever seen. So you certainly have the eye for what the city is looking for. However, it is still residential. I don't even think it needs to be a separate building in front of the building. If there were for rent or an amenity purpose, we're in a post-pandemic world, and the dynamic of work from home has changed. But especially in an apartment unit, you may not have the physical space to have a home office. So if you had a for rent or an amenity along that front side that was not a residential use, those were offices that were hourly or just amenity space, but not residential in nature, I think that we would be willing to listen to that type of a strategy. The building's beautiful. The Metro Place approach and bringing vibrancy, activation, the live, work, shop, play into that area is something that is desperately needed within the city of Dublin. If you've driven there anytime recently, you can see, to the Board of Representatives' earlier comment about there's enough office space in that area. It's not currently occupied. There's a lot of open office buildings. But the direction that we've had from the City Council, the direction that we've implemented across the city of Dublin is we don't do residential along the highway. We don't put our most vulnerable individuals, and I realize this is a high-end product, this is setback, this is everything that we would want residential in this area to be, but the noise pollution, the regular pollution, the light, everything along the highway, we framed Dublin very well. We put that high Class A office along the frontage. We don't have the sound barriers. it is pleasant to drive into the city of Dublin, which is not always the case on a thoroughfare or on a freeway adjacent property. So with that, Mr. Underhill, I'd like to invite you back up. This is just the first question. You have heard kind of a mix, a blend of the other three, but we barely scraped the surface. Would you like the commission to go forward with the other 3 items?
Maybe the more productive thing to do, could I ask a couple of follow-up questions for you
Certainly.
for clarification? So I'm hearing good things and, I swear that I expect to come in and say, yeah, everything's great, for you to say that. But would you be able to expand upon as commissioners, I understand maybe having something in between the residential and the interstate would be preferable. Would it be of the same size and scale of this, or would it be something that sort of catches your eye and you'd still be able to maybe see some of this building? And maybe we don't know, but I want to make sure if we would go in that direction that we know exactly what we're trying to get at.
So I do want to preface that any rezoning is a legislative action. So we would give recommendation to city council, but ultimately that would be their decision in order to rezone the property, which would be a required first step in order to move forward. But Mr. Henschel, if I could have you present just the building kind of view, not necessarily the one with the green, but the building itself. There we go. So the building itself really, again, Mr. Parrish, fantastic job. It doesn't look residential from the 270 corridor. However, the adjacent use, and if you could do there we go, that view. So we're looking kind of 270, yeah, there we go, bottom right-hand side, the view there. The closest portion of the building to 270 as it loops through is currently residential. And so if we were truly to adopt a vertical and horizontal mixed use, then Commission, looking to you also, if the component most adjacent to 270, and therefore the view corridor from traveling south or traveling north, especially as you're coming off from 270 to 161, then if that component is a non-residential component, then I think that we stand a better chance of having productive discussions here and forwarding a productive or positive recommendation to City Council.
Thank you. That's very informative.
Looking back to the rest of the commission for at least 3 other head nods.
Well, I put a slightly finer point. The position of council and the commission is not to have residential facing the interstate. That doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't mean that this is my opinion, that no residential occupant can possibly see a ramp if they go, underneath the blind or whatever. So I'm in concert with my fellow commissioners, but to me, it's not a binary. It's a scale.
Okay.
This is an easy call for me that it's residential facing. And I don't have a solution, but in my opinion, if it's not all or nothing, if there were buffers, if it was a different site plan and there was a residence, as I said, or, I don't know, it's subjective.
Okay.
So that's my position.
And just to go, large scale, let's say you have a 100-acre parcel, and that is one building, and it has a residential component on the very, what would that be, eastern side? We're not going to say no because it has that residential vertical horizontal component on the opposite end. So we will certainly work, and we do. Metro Place needs vibrancy. It needs activation. It needs redevelopment. It needs residential. But the 270 corridor is the sensitive part.
Okay.
Ms. Harder.
Just to add to that is to keep in concerns about the noise and what that would be like living in that residential setting, the noise factor. Thank you.
And hopefully, as we would move on to later stages, we can provide more specifics on materials and things like that. And it's kind of like when you go out into a site and try to develop it that's never been developed before with a bunch of trees. Everybody thinks the developer wants to take all the trees down. It's really the exact opposite. You got to do something But here, we would be just as interested as you all would with making sure that those items are not a detriment to renting the property.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill. Any other clarification that any of you would seek from the commission?
No, I just very much appreciate the guidance and taking the time to review and keeping adherence to previous discussions, right? I think, there's a lot of great integrity that's being held and focus that's being used. I think a couple of just clarifying questions I have are from a massing along with density overall, how that is received with this in terms of being a 5-story product. If it were more vertical, does that have any interpretation if it has maybe more of a commercial aspect to it on a higher floor in terms of elevation, as you talked about your vertical horizontal eye lines? Are those the kind of considerations, or is it more separate uses, separate buildings in a mixed use focused plan in that concentration?
So typically speaking, when we're looking at concept plan, we're just looking at, and Mr. Underhill's heard me say this before, we're looking at crayons on paper. Hey, could this be acceptable? When we get to that preliminary, we're dealing with the massing, the Duplo blocks, how it kind of measures out. So due to the fact that this has that residential component along 270, I don't know that the commission would be able to say, yes, we can do 2 more stories if we shift back and have that. I don't know that we would be able to give you feedback that would be very constructive and not require some, again, crayons on paper, the next iteration if it fundamentally changes.
I would just add that I agree, but I would also say if you do consider additional height, I would challenge to have a little more articulation in the building, so it varies a little bit in terms of the style of the building.
And I would add that I support more density if you have the right mix of uses. And if you look at that parcel from the loop road out to the highway, it's 400 feet or so. It's a very deep parcel. In a conventional development, you could get one side being one thing and the other side being the other. So you could have commercial on the highway side and you could have residential on the other, and create a real mixed use block there that was quite interesting. And this site could be the start of that, like one end of it. And in the future, it could be expanded. So that's the type of development pattern I think that we need to be looking at for Metro Center in terms of future uses.
And really, a lot of the onus falls back on us, right? And so you're looking at single parcel development, we're looking at city development. And we don't think that you should be responsible for city development. That would be, not advantageous to you. So I do think, especially with the quality of the material, the time and effort that's been put into this proposal, I do think that we'd make great partners. I think that we would welcome Borer into the neighborhood and especially into Metro Place. So hence my question earlier as to if you considered other locations. But with our feedback today, is there anything else that you seek clarification or direction on?
Just one more item, and I can't remember who spoke to it, noted a sense of specialness. I don't mean to pry, but it's somewhat vague. I'd like to understand just maybe if there's a inspiration of that. What is that special? Is that uses? Is that experiential? Any more thought beyond that of special?
Mr. Chinnock?
That was my comment. Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I think when we're wrestling with it too, and it might be a question for the commission too. I'd hesitate to get so far away from residential that it turns into apartment that looks like it's an office building. Because again, we're challenging you a lot right now to do a lot of different things, but I think it still needs to feel residential. That's what I was getting at more when I was asking questions about the green space and some other amenities where you want residents to be outside. I mean, been in Dublin enough to understand how important green space is to us. And I know you guys have added paths and some things like that. But I think that's what I'm getting at is more outdoor space, outdoor activity, and engagement in the building. And I know you've added some patios. Again, like I said, you made a great step. And I just think as we come back and take this thing a little bit further, I would just add to some of those exterior amenities to the space.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all.
That does it. I know you have other things on your agenda. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Underhill. All right. So we are moving on to case number 2, CMHCH, Hotel and Condominiums at various parcel IDs 273-012909, 273-008269, and 22-152 INF. Thank you, Mr. Suplak. Sorry, I neglected to. This application is a result for the construction of a 9-story condominium building, a 7-story hotel, and an event center over a 2-story podium building for parking with building amenities and a pedestrian bridge. The 2.85-acre site is zoned Bridge Street District, Scioto River neighborhood, and is located southeast of the roundabout, everyone's favorite roundabout, at Riverside Drive and West Dublin Granville Road. Mr. Henschel, I'll turn the time back over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Well, good evening again. Before you tonight is an informal review for a hotel and condominium project happening at the intersection of West Dublin Granville Road and Riverside Drive. So this process is a little different than the process we just discussed. Before you is an informal review. This is an optional step within the Bridge Street District. The concept plan is the first step. The difference there between the concept plan we just saw and the concept plan that would come with this project is that concept plan here would require in this case, potentially a recommendation, as there may be some sort of a development agreement here. It would be a recommendation to City Council. So a determination would be required at that step. But tonight it is just for feedback to guide the applicant as they move forward with their project. So this is an approximately 2.85-acre site, recently rezoned to the Scioto River neighborhood from commercial. So the site was rezoned in March of 2022 to accommodate the development that is being proposed to you tonight. This site does sit west of Shopsy River Ridge and south of Bridge Park across the street of West Dublin Granville Road. Shown on the screen are existing conditions here. On the left, you can see the view from the roundabout looking south. And on the right, you can see the looking north from Riverside Drive. That photo is the location of an existing retention pond. And that's an item that will continue to be discussed with staff as that currently serves the Shopsy River Ridge. So again, that's really outside the purview tonight. We're really looking at the scope of this project. And that's something that our staff and the applicant will continue to work on. Shown on the screen is the street network map. This is a gridded plan document that's been approved by City Council to direct both commission staff and council for future connections for our street grid. With this site, there is no proposed street extension, but this is to show you the types of streets and designations that are adjacent to the site. The site sits at the intersection of 2 principal frontage streets and 2 corridor connectors. They both are principal frontage streets, so they both hold a significant amount of importance as the site is to be developed. Access to this site is provided to the east off of the district corridor, the district connector street, which would be Dale Drive. As this has been rezoned into the Scioto River neighborhood, it is required to abide by the neighborhood standards that are listed in code. Just to quickly glance over these. So this district does call for a mix of land uses. You see this as you look at previous development that has happened within this district, specifically Bridge Park, where there is a combination of residential, commercial, and office. These all work in a balance, and that's the goal, especially as you move further south and as you move to the east within this district. Additionally, this is to create more comfortable and walkable, pedestrian-friendly street network and development. This site is subject to a gateway requirement due to the intersection at 161 and Riverside Drive. So in the future, that is something that would need to be provided for and accommodated for with this development. So shown on the screen is the proposed site plan for this development. This is a mixed use development that includes a condominium tower, which is on the northern portion of the site, a hotel tower, which is centrally located in the development, and an event center, which is the southern piece of this building. All these buildings are connected by a central concourse which acts as more of a lobby to access all of these uses. Additional uses include a restaurant. I believe there's two within this development currently on the north side of this development, and then the podium parking, which is beneath the structure. As you can see with the dark green at the center of the screen, the vehicular access is provided to the site from Dale Drive, which connects through the shops at River Ridge's existing development. To go through some of the images that the applicant has provided to explain what the traffic flow on site would be. Currently, it outlines the red is for any visitors that are attending this site and going to the event center, restaurant, or hotel. The residents of the condominium have a separate entrance into the parking garage below the structure, which is on the north side of the site. Any loading bay or servicing would be accessed on the southern portion of the site through a ramp that would be accessed through existing drives and parking lots for the shops River Ridge. And then finally, to talk through pedestrian circulation for this site, the applicant is proposing a new pedestrian bridge. This is only accessed off of the site, which, if you can follow my cursor, potentially, the entrance here is through this terrace that is proposed on the northern portion here. This currently does not connect to the existing pedestrian infrastructure that you find along West Dublin Granville Road and Riverside Drive. It should be noted that the city is in the beginning stages of conducting a streetscape corridor study along West Dublin Granville Road to identify opportunities to make West Dublin Granville Road a more pedestrian-friendly streetscape. The study will identify speed management strategies, implement more urban style access management along the corridor, and improve crosswalks along this corridor. So the commission should consider what is being proposed tonight and whether this contributes to that pedestrian scale that this district is desperately looking for. To go through some of the renderings that have been provided. So again, all these buildings are connected by a central concourse, and they each have their own tower. On the left, you'll see both the hotel and the condo tower. The condo tower is on the left. They are showing 9 stories on this, but that would be 9 stories from the concourse. So in reality, when looking at, and the applicant will explain this further about what is below grade and what is at grade, this tower could be up to about 9 or 10 stories. The hotel would be up to 8 stories as well. And then the event center is approximately 3. And here are additional views, as you can see, from the rear of the property, and then coming up Riverside Drive, which would be looking northeast. At the bottom of the screen, this gives you a context map of existing development, existing stories and heights within Bridge Park as you look north. And again, it's a rough estimate about the scale of this, but as the heights are not defined, the stories are provided for both the condominium and hotel tower and how those fit into the scale of what is existing along the Cider River neighborhood. So with that, there are 3 questions for the commission to consider tonight. The first is regarding the proposed uses and whether the commission is supportive of the general site layout. The second is about the massing of the mixed-use building, and the third regarding the circulation, both vehicular and pedestrian, for the site. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, our applicant is also here to address your questions tonight. Thanks.
All right, on this application, we are going to handle questions separately. So if we have questions for staff, we'll ask them now, and then we will invite the applicant forward. Any questions specifically for staff? Mr. Chinook.
Quick question for you. So assume the access to the site with we'll call it the curved drives, is that due to the topography on that site? Is that why they're?
And you're speaking for the pedestrian?
Well, the drive, more of the drive aisles as well.
Yes. So there is significant grade change as you move closer towards shops at River Ridge, and then also the Wendy's, which is that northern site. So I want to say it's about between 20 and 30 feet of grade in that short distance. I believe it starts about where the pedestrian bridge starts to wind as you get the grade and go upgrade to be able to access it.
And do we know this? Do we know the slope of the main entrance drive yet? Have we got that far?
We do not.
I'm just curious. Thank you.
Mr. Hendershot, could I invite you up? Can you just talk through the city's engineering on this corner if the city would allow additional access this close to that roundabout?
Good evening. With both Riverside Drive and 161 being principal frontage streets, we would not permit access directly off of those two streets.
Mr. Chinook, does that provide clarity? Thank you, Mr. Hendershot. Mr. Way.
Don't sit down. So as we move to the south of the roundabout, the character of Riverside Drive changes. There's a lot of connectivity from Bridge Park across to the park. When we get to the south side of the roundabout, is there any provision for pedestrian access to the river? Especially to Kiwanis Park is there, you've got the Nature Conservancy, all of that, or is this site cut off from the river once you get south of the roundabout from a pedestrian standpoint?
And Jenny, if you could speak to the study and what encompasses, what area, because I know we're concentrating on 161, but how far south does that study approach?
Yes, so for the study along 161, that's really looking at that 161, so along that frontage piece. Again, we're in the process of sorting out the details on the scope of that project, but that's really looking at that frontage. Again, the pedestrian connectivity is really happening at the roundabout. I don't know if Tina wants to chime in on how that works, but.
Sure, good evening. There are pedestrian crossings at the roundabout on the east leg and the north leg, but there's not on the south leg, which is, I think, what you're getting at. Right. As folks kind of make their way around here, there's a signalized crossing, of course, at Dale Drive, and the pedestrian access under the 161 bridge, adjacent to that one travel lane. So that is a nice pedestrian way to get access to the river, but it's kind of a long way around the horn to get there.
Yeah, so this site really won't have any opportunities for access to the river. It's pretty much has to go north and then the crossings that are there, whatever. I mean, there's multiple crossings, so. And I just wanted to reinforce the comment about the streetscape for 161 does not, how far around the corner does it go down Riverside Drive, or is it, it's a curve, so how do you?
We're just in the initial stages of that right now and determining the limits, but the rough description is just 161 between Riverside and Sawmill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Other questions for staff at this time? Mr. Supalack.
Can you give us a sense for current height restrictions as we move south down Riverside? And maybe inclusive of current height restrictions in the shops parcel as well.
And
Sure.
just if I could expand that a little bit, not necessarily just restrictions, but realizations, because a lot of that has been developed and perhaps could have different allowable.
Yes. So Shops at River Ridge was included in the recent rezoning for this site. So that would be under the purview of that side of River neighborhood. Any redevelopment there would need to meet the same requirements that are being met here. This is the southern boundary of the Bridge Street District. I believe the properties south are central commercial, community commercial. So those are limited in their height. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but usually if it's standard district, probably 35 feet roughly. We can verify that later on, but this scale of development, what's allowed here, which the tallest building is typically a corridor building, 6 stories. You wouldn't be getting that height as you move further south of this. So this does create an opportunity to kind of blend development as you start to get into Bridge Street.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Other questions from the commission for staff at this time? Mr. Way?
Are there any restrictions of putting a pedestrian bridge across 161? Because of the type of roadway it is, or who regulates that?
So that's, the pedestrian bridge is not a type of facility that we consider in the Bridge Street District. So coordinating that would require, it would just require additional discussion with staff, with our transportation and engineering team. That's certainly something that absolutely would need to be approved here, but with city council as well. But we don't have standards about what that needs to be. I believe there would be ADA requirements that would have to be met with that. But from a zoning standpoint, we don't have anything at the moment.
But there's no highway limitations or state regulations or something that would prohibit that?
To my knowledge right now, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But we
thanks.
can have that for you next time we see this.
Okay.
Ms. Roush, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Don't try not to do that. But can you talk to any preliminary discussions that staff is having about any safety considerations for a pedestrian corridor, pedestrian crossing at that particular intersection?
Yeah, so that's what part of what this 161 study is really looking at. So how to help break down that streetscape and how to make that larger corridor of 161. Are there opportunities similar to what was done on Riverside Drives in terms of breaking that down to be more pedestrian and provide those safe crossings across the street?
Thank you, Ms. Roush. Any other questions from the commission for staff? Thank you, Mr. Hanschel. Is the applicant in attendance? Would you like to step forward? If you could state your name and address. It's not like you haven't been before us before, but if you could state your name and address.
You recognize me? Russell Hunter, Crawford Hoying, 6640 Riverside Drive. So thanks, everybody. Obviously, I work with Crawford Hoying. I lead our development group. And I've been with Crawford Hoying since really the very, very beginning days of Bridge Park. So I recognize a couple of new faces. I wanted to say hi, Mr. Chinook, Ms. Harder. It's our first time getting to see each other, but like I've been here so many times I've stopped counting. So
if I were getting married, he'd be invited to my wedding.
So, I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is sort of a unique partnership, right? And I'm sure everyone has seen the announcement. The hotel is a Cameron Mitchell Hotel. It's the first of its kind. So we've actually been looking for an opportunity to do something like this with them for quite some time. And we've looked at lots of different sites for a variety of reasons. None of them have worked. And then it's sort of like that time when the light bulb goes off and you realize that the answer has been right in front of you the entire time. And that is that we had this site that we didn't quite know what to do with for a variety of reasons, access being one of them, both pedestrian but also vehicular. We strongly suspected they were going to tell us that we couldn't access the site from Riverside Drive or for 161. Anybody that's tried to cross the roundabout, cross the street there, or even 161 at Dale Drive, it's not pleasant. And so we've always kind of seen those as, oh, what do we do about that? So when we started thinking about this site earlier this year, one of the first things we did is actually reach out to American Structure Point. So they were the engineers that did the roundabout. And first we talked to them about the access for vehicles. They said the same thing. Even if the city would allow it, we don't know how we could engineer it and it'd be safe. And then we asked them about the pedestrian bridge and specifically just, is it even feasible? So they studied it for us. Basically, they didn't design a bridge. They just simply said, do the grades work? Could we make something work? And what we found was that, yes, we could. The grades do work. It lands basically just to the west of the new Wendy's, the existing Wendy's restaurant. And then on the other side, it would land where there's a little one-way extension of Mooney Street. So that it's just to the east of that office building. So effectively, that would no longer be vehicular. That would become the ramp up for this new pedestrian bridge that would connect everything that's happening to the south at River Ridge with everything that's happening to the north at Bridge Park. So, so we kind of said, okay, we've got those two questions answered. Let's get out our crayons or our big fat markers and let's just start to think about what this could look like. And after we knew, by the way, also that both as a result of anything that we wanted to do with this site, that we needed to get a rezone, the community plan called for this to be a part of the Scioto River neighborhood, the Bridge Park zoning. So we did that. Neighbors were at that meeting, talked a lot about height of buildings, specifically really worried about, and this is a great visual, the Martin Place folks, talking about what's happening on the southeast corner of the property, and not wanting 6-story buildings there. And I can tell you, there are leases in place for everything else at River Ridge with the exception of the Montgomery Inn, and then of course all of the unused property there to the west. We have zero plans to do anything with River Ridge. This is all focused on what's in that yellow block and will be for the foreseeable future. I have no knowledge of us ever wanting to do anything there. Again, leases in place. So we actually reached out, one of the gentlemen that was at there, Tom Cromer, lives on Martin Place, said, hey, we want to fly some drones with some balloons on them. We literally hooked balloons up to drones, and we started over in the bottom right corner, the southeast corner, and we sent the drone up over the trees to a point where we could see it. It was about 140 feet in the air, where you could see it kind of crest the trees, because there's 2 tree lines between the residences to the south, because there's that office in the middle. And then we sent the drone to the west, closer to the actual site, and we completely lost it in the trees. And so we went back down there again, and we said, okay, how high does this thing have to get in order for it to really get up? And it was about 180 feet where you could kind of see the drone through the trees. It had these big red balloons on top of it. So we knew that, okay, this site's pretty far away from these residences. We feel like we should be able to work within these parameters, but also create something that when you're coming from Old Dublin, from the west to the east, that it's balanced across all of the existing development. And so that it balances with the existing development and then pulls itself back down as you go to the south. We actually met with them again just a couple of weeks ago. We went up to Vaso. We looked down at the site. We shared with them all of the drawings that you see here today. Had a lot of conversations again about height. Offered to say, now that we've got a building that we can actually start to understand, let's get the drone back out there. Let's get that out there and let's say, okay, this is where it's going to be. Let's send it up in the air. Let's really start to understand how this might affect, your view sheds. So that hasn't happened yet. Because, like I said, this was just a couple of weeks ago. But I just wanted to make sure that you understand that we have made those connections. That we do want to work with people. We're trying to balance sort of development and sort of broader understanding of what this entire neighborhood, not just this one particular site, but how it balances with everything else. With the needs of the folks to the south, because we do want to be good neighbors, and hopefully I think we've proven that over the last 10 years or so. So with that, I really wanted to turn it over to Chris Meyer. So he's our architect on this project, nationally recognized hotel architect. He'll be working with us on the design, and with that, I'll kind of let him walk you through the overarching principles that guided the massing you see.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Welcome, Mr. Meyer.
Good evening, everyone. It's Chris Myers, Myers and Associates. We're at 232 North 3rd Street in Columbus. Good evening. It's good to be back with you again on another exciting project. Zach, thank you so much for a really great introduction. You basically took everything I had planned to talk about, so thank you for that. What I want to share with you tonight is a couple pieces of information that really might help you answer some of these first questions. As part of an informal, this is really the beginning, and the hardest thing for us as architects is actually we haven't yet really designed the architecture. Right now, we're really thinking about site planning and uses and programs and budgets and really thinking about how this thing could conceive into architecture. But one of the great benefits right now is your feedback. So what we're receiving from you will really help us shape where this thing is going. The 3 things to focus on really have to do with the proposed uses, Secondly is the massing, and what we're going to really touch on is height and scale when it comes to that and some of the positioning on site. And then third is the pedestrian connectivity and some of these circulation routes. Those were those drawings with the red lines on them. But what I'd like to do is just kind of walk you through the uses that are proposed within here. It is truly a mixed-use development. With that, we start with a hotel. We have a condominium. You can call it a tower. We also have a shared concourse space, which will house some restaurants, and then structured parking down below, and then, of course, an event space to support all of those functions. I wanted to start with describing to you the hotel. So it will be a Cameron Mitchell branded hotel. That brand development is underway right now. All of the concept of what this thing will be stylistically and in terms of its hospitality and all of the amenities that it has. There's a whole group of us beginning that process. But the backbone of this project, it's a Marriott branded hotel, which is an Autograph series. So Autograph hotels are what Marriott puts into their premium brand. Above these are luxury brands, which are Ritz-Carlton is a good example. So an Autograph brand is a very highly regarded brand nationally. In the state of Ohio, we have three. There is the Levesque Tower, which is in downtown Columbus. Metropolitan on the 9, which is up in Cleveland. And then the Lido Park Hotel down in Cincinnati. The interesting thing about those is those are all in existing historic buildings that were renovated to put Autographs into. This will be the first new build Autograph. I think it's actually in the Midwest, but absolutely in Ohio. The brand started in 2010. There's about 128 of them in the United States and about 200 around the world. I was going to let you look through this. This is actually so the important thing about Autographs are they're very high class, very well-designed, well-maintained, exclusive properties. It will certainly be a premier hotel, not only for Dublin and Columbus, Central Ohio, but really our part of the country. When we take a hotel project like this and we marry it up with a condominium development, the great benefit is these condominium owners also now have hospitality services from the hotel. And so as luxury residences within this building, we're looking at a condominium segment that is anywhere between 21 to 24 units in the building. Right now, they're hovering between 2,800 square feet to up to 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. So there's a wide range of very custom design condominiums that are planned for this location. The position of this in the building has independent parking. It also has a shared lobby space, but a concierge level entry for the condominium portion of the building as well. But come down from your unit, the restaurant and the bar is right there in the lobby, and your car is down below. For the other venues, there is a event space, which we have at about 16,000 square feet, which includes all of its supportive spaces, banquet kitchen, back of house, storage. And then we have about an 8,000 square foot event room, which could have events for 350, 400 people. We've been talking about this event space as more of a celebration room. So think of it more for weddings and other, family type celebrations, because it would also work in concert with the Exchange, which is part of Bridge Park, which is also managed by Cameron Mitchell's organization. The restaurants that are being looked at is currently, I think Zach mentioned two, I think there's probably going to be three. The one will be a signature restaurant, probably in comparison to Cameron's Ocean Prime restaurants, which you've seen throughout the country. A more casual type setting for a second restaurant, more of like a breakfast and 2-meal offering, and then probably a cocktail lounge, maybe even something like a speakeasy. So all of those brands of what those restaurants and food and beverage operations are also being conceived as we speak. There'll be banquet service functions for dining for the event space as well. To support all of this area, what we've done is we've developed the parking strategy for this building to be basically all underground. We have a very unique site that from east to west, from the shopping center down to Riverside Drive, is a 31-foot grade change. And so in that grade change, what we're able to do is basically embed all of the parking and all of the service points underneath and create a podium for the hotel and the condo to sit on top of. As we do that, the parking levels, we're able to have about 350 parking spaces, including private parking garages for the condominium owners, space for valet service for all of the events and restaurants. But one very unique thing that we're putting is right underneath this event center, we're having our service court for all of our deliveries, trash, drop-offs, for all of the things that are necessary to maintain and operate and functionally use a building like this. Now, the benefit to that is all of the visual of seeing dumpsters and the beeping trucks backing up and all of those things. It's all within the volume of the building. So that helps us enormously. As we say, we're trying to be great neighbors to those around us and contain any of the noises and smells that might happen in terms of supporting a space like this. The hotel will also have an amenity function within it, which probably will include some sort of high-end spa. It will also have a rooftop pool is being planned and an amenity space. So when you see the massing, and I'll walk you through the planning of the building, but the upper portion where it says 7 on the hotel bar, that's the amenity level. When we start looking at a site like this, we really need to partner with some of the best. And so on our team includes EMH&T and an MKScape. And the reason for that is not only their expertise, but it's also their thorough knowledge and awareness of everything in this immediate area when it comes to road engineering, all of the stormwater adjustments that we have to now create. And creating this cohesive landscape design, not only in connecting to Bridge Park to this site, but also to your new Riverside Park and all of the landscape components to really create an extension of a very successful part of town. For the second component of what I wanted to share with you is really the massing of this building. So we have a couple of these views. I also share this.
And then just for the record, as you're getting back to the microphone, the item provided to the commission was a directory of autograph hotels. And then the massing structure, the model that we're being presented is of the site itself.
So I'm the sort of old school architect. I still like models. The renderings are great, but someone always asks you for what's the view on this side, and you're like, I got to go back to my computer to make that. So hopefully this helps you, and we're certainly eager to pass it around in the audience if they would like to see it as well. So the massing of this building is really rooted in its context. We have so many relevant items around us that we can take cues from when it comes to not only the positioning of the forms of the building on the site, but also the size and height and scale. So from the building section, can we go to that? The one that you had the elevation of Bridge Park as well. So going from south to north, which this drawing on the bottom will say from the right to the left, we start all the way over on the right-hand side at the residential properties of Martin Drive, I think. Those are the folks that we had a chance to meet with a couple times and start to hear what some of their concerns might be or what sensitivities we need to make sure we're addressing as we develop this building. And of course, height, of course, massing, size, scale, noises, all of those things. And so we're really planning this thing in response to some of those components. The building from the south end going north, it starts with that event space. And for a point of reference, I wanted to share with you, one of the conditions that's on site right now is the old Montgomery Inn. The height of the Montgomery Inn from its front door to its top is 48 feet. Now keep in mind, that's also sitting on top of a hill that's 31 feet down to Riverside Drive. So the heights I'm going to give you on some of these things for reference, the baseline height that I'm going to start with on all of these is Riverside Drive. So keep in mind that we're embedding parking into the hill, but our entry drive, and I think Jamie asked the question, that entry drive slope is relatively flat because we're driving into the top of the parking podium. The podium that the buildings sit upon is on that level that the Shops at River Ridge, it's great. So the site falls away down to the road. What's important about the Montgomery Inn is if you take the 31 plus the 48, my math says 79 feet. Our elevation, our height for the event space, we're actually 50 feet above Riverside. And so in that 50 feet above Riverside, we're actually almost 30 feet lower than what the Montgomery Inn is currently. And the two buildings, our building versus that one, which would be removed, are basically right next to where they are. So if you go to the site and you see the area, recognize that lowest portion on our south end is, the math is what, 30 feet lower than what the Montgomery Inn is. As we continue to go up, the height on our hotel guest room tower, which is a 6-story bar from the lobby level, 6 stories plus the 7th floor is the amenity level. So the roof of the amenity level, we're at 100 feet above Riverside Drive. I'm going to give you the rest of the heights. As we go further up, the high point of our condominium tower, again, off of Riverside Drive, is 132 to probably 135 feet. Now, for reference, go across the street to the tallest building at Bridge Park, which is the AC Hotel. The AC is 120 feet to its roof line, again, from that same base point. So point of reference, it might be hard to see in this drawing, but the blue portion in that drawing is our condo tower, and we're 12 to 15 feet taller than the AC. And then you could see the building cascades downward as it goes further to the south. I believe there's a current allowance of 6 stories as part of the zoning that Russ had talked about. So we do recognize there's a waiver required for any height adjustments. But when we look at a property like this and we really start to study how do we get this to fit well into the context, a couple of those things drive us to want the building to have a little bit more height on that very north end, again, to sort of create this crescendo going up to where the roundabout is and having this gateway for the community on either side of 161. Another aspect to this planning, and you could see it well in the upper left rendering of the massing of the building, is you notice we isolated the condominium tower from the hotel tower and we put this slot in between them. That helps us enormously for the condominiums because now they have great view, they have balconies, they have wonderful views at the position where they're on the site. But what that slot is really for is it gives us the view when you pull in to the entry drive, you're looking at the link, the bridge going across the river. Sort of picture frames that because we see that as really an iconic piece within the city that is something that we really want to create this visual connection between the massing and architecture of this building and what has been done with that beautiful bridge. So the sight lines and the angles and the bending of this building are really relative to how do we create great views from inside the building outward, but also how do we create vistas through the building to other portions of the community. Can we go to the other rendering? So this view on the left side, you see this sort of wedge shape down below. That's planned to be the signature restaurant, which would be the thing you would walk straight into from the front door on the opposite side of this. And that signature restaurant, again, is to really capitalize on the view of the river, the beautiful park, and of course, the pedestrian bridge. The concept and planning of that restaurant is it's being looked at as a two-story space where you walk in on the mezzanine level and you're able to look down into the dining room. And if you've been to Cameron's restaurants, I'm sure you understand the quality of not only the dining and the experience and the food, but also the interior design are always very, very well done. The pedestrian access and circulation is the third piece that I wanted to go through with you. Could we go to those drawings with the red? We thought the first one with 3 shades of green would be hard to describe, so we broke it into different drawings here. So this is first on a vehicle approach. We come from West Dublin Granville Road. We turn onto Dale Drive, which is an existing curb cut. All of the improvements to this route, we would extend probably all the way up to 161 in terms of just making sure pavement is heavy duty and everything we would need to really have our drive extend all the way to the street. But this red area shows you that we have a boulevard entry. Those triangular shapes, those are actually the porte cochere canopies at the entry points. So the one in the top, we'll say it's at 11 o'clock on that circle. That's the condominium entrance. Right below that is the hotel and restaurant entrance. And then further down is the entrance for drop-offs for events at the banquet space, which is the square towards the bottom. We anticipate that virtually all of the parking will probably be valet and some self-parking, but probably in limited uses just because of the nature of this type of hotel, the restaurant, and the event space. So the pedestrian, the vehicle traffic brings you down, and again, it bows like that at the bottom because we're going down that 30-foot grade point, and we're trying to get into the mid-level of the garage. We actually have 3 levels of parking in garage. So we can go to the next one. So if this is for the 21 to 24 property owners in the condominium, same thing, entry on that boulevard. So again, they get that view through the wedge of the building of the bridge beyond. But there's a little point where they can tuck over to the right and drop down below grade and go into the upper level of the parking garage, which also includes a lot of back-of-house functions for the hotel. So housekeeping services, maintenance, and a lot of the mechanical equipment and storage is at that level also. This allows the residents to have direct access to sort of their own garage within the garage down below. Can we go to the next one? The service path coming into the lowest point of the building would be along the south edge of the shops. The entire south edge of the back of those existing retail spaces is their current service drive. So access and service points to all of the shops in that existing center, that's the route that trash and delivery already take. We would most likely enhance it further with cleaning up some of the surfacing, probably some landscape screening. But the routing that you see would allow those vehicles to, again, come in below the event space. And all of the turnarounds of trucks, the banging of a dumpster, the beeping of backing up is all within the building. And then the last one. So we feel this is the most important one. This is the pedestrian routing to this building. Russ had mentioned the beginnings of the process of a pedestrian bridge coming over West Dublin Grandview. We've been working with Dublin recently on another development, actually with Crawford Hoying, up the road, and that whole project was really cultivated in how do we start this process of really enhancing the streetscape of West Dublin Granville Road. So we have a lot of awareness of, I think, the direction you're trying to go. One of the things that is probably misrepresented in this, to me, this looks like we're just going to do a sidewalk around Riverside in the front. I want to assure you what we're looking to do is a really enhanced, wonderful landscape. And we're talking with our friends at MKSK about how do we make these sort of meandering paths? How do we have points that we could access the building in multiple locations rather than having to walk all the way around to come in. The development of that pedestrian bridge will also have a means to be able to come down to the streetscape on West Dublin Granville. I think that was something that we had talked with staff about, as in the development of that bridge, that will be part of that. The winding path that you see and how it sort of snakes around like that is simply to allow ADA compliance and minimal slope. So we have to have a little more distance to be able to have the proper ease and slope, because we really see this portion of Bridge Park as being a true continuation of what's over at Bridge Park. So level of finish and quality that you see there is certainly what we're planning on extending over to this side. So again, our focus tonight was what's going in this place, give you some reassurance on the level of quality. Also, and I think most of our discussion might lead towards massing and height and scale, and that's something we really want to gain your feedback, and I think some of the residents are here as well. And then it looks to be a little complex when it comes to how do you circulate and how do you get around. So we're just at the beginning, but what I'm hoping is that we're conveying to you that we recognize that those are the things that really will make for a successful development, and they really deserve to be at the beginning and forefront of what we're starting with. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Myers. As you know, the nice way of putting it, for the Dublin whole process, we're very thoughtful, we're very detail oriented, or if we use synonyms, we're pretty darn critical and opinionated. But I think what we've done and what we've proven in times past is that we end up with really good products.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate your adherence to the process and understanding that together, working together, we come up with different products, and sometimes they don't exactly land the way that first initiated, but
I'll tell you, they never do. But that's a benefit.
it's almost like you've been to Dublin before.
Yeah.
All right, so looking to the commission for questions for the applicant. Mr. Chinnock.
First, I got to applaud you for the model. That's impressive. I can't believe you found an X-Acto knife and chipboards. That's really great. Thanks for providing that. It was very helpful.
The kids in the office do the 3D printing. The old guys try to do the X-Acto blade parts.
And again, the presentation was awesome. I appreciate all the thought that you put into it. Can you talk a little bit about the terracing and what's your vision for what's happening? I mean, I love the terracing. I like the step back and all that. What's your vision for what's kind of happening on those terraces? And addition to that question, at the level, I guess lower level along Riverside.
Yeah.
What's your vision for how you would be screening the parking?
So I'll start with the terraces, and this thanks for this. This is the right slide to show. Where I said that signature restaurant is, there's some different levels that come off of the hotel lobby, come off of the signature restaurant at a mid-level and down low. There's two things that we're trying to be very, very cautious about. Your roundabout is wonderful, but it has some danger to it if you don't really know how to maneuver that many lanes in a roundabout. We don't want to add to that. So we didn't want to put, a distraction right at street level. Plus, for that dining experience or the view from the lobby of the hotel, to be up one level and seeing over the cars and seeing the park, the bridge, and the river, it's a better vantage point. I don't know if you have it, but we have a drawing that shows that. But the terraces are a result of these last few years and what has been discovered in not only restaurants but in hotels. People want to have great hospitality, great service, and the option to be outside.
Okay.
And so what we're trying to do as Cameron and his folks are developing the concepts of these restaurants, to have indoor-outdoor opportunities or sort of spaces that we can have some engagement with this view that you have from this site is really wonderful. Over on the right-hand side, where that pedestrian walk ties into a terrace, that actually is on a sight line from Mooney Street in Bridge Park. And throughout Bridge Park, which is a wonderful pedestrian experience, what we're trying to create is that view corridor that the end of Mooney, you see this terrace and that's where the breakfast restaurant is, and people, everyone's happy, let's go over there. So we're using these terraces to really energize and create this dynamic use to be able to create connection outward, but also to draw people inward. The attention to the Riverside Drive elevation, I think is going to be critically important, because what we're trying to do is create a landscape that embeds all of the parking. Our effort is that you won't see any parking, any vents, anything. And in order to do that, we're going to have to kind of tier and create paths along that way to have a designed landscape that serves as a screen for the garage. Now, on the upper level of the garage, on the west side of the building, we actually have kitchen, offices, staff spaces, housekeeping. And so there is opportunity that windows and architecture can happen. But for this level of hospitality, seeing parking is probably not an option. With that, we also recognize that right across Riverside, we have this beautiful tree line. And so the position of the hotel, rather than making the hotel another tower, we wanted to make it longer and draw down Riverside Drive, because the west view out of those rooms is looking all into a beautiful tree canopy and the river, and it's a different experience than looking up towards the bridge. So that elevation is something we're beginning to study, but it's all being driven on how do we make the ground condition work for the garage, and how do we take advantage of some of the natural beauty that's right around us.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question too on the site, more specifically to the vehicle, I guess navigation. Have you got as far as to do, study turning radiuses and things like that?
It's starting. A lot of those windy curves we ran by our friends at EMH&T. They're also going to begin a traffic study just to see uses and counts and to a bigger context than really just this development. But I'll say yes, sort of.
Okay, I was just curious because it's it's a lot. And part of this too would probably be, you mentioned at the River Ridge shopping center, that main corridor, you probably have to potentially widen that or make some street improvements to.
Yeah, the boulevard that we're showing in green is all, we'll say new construction. That boulevard is not there now. So certainly there'll be some adaptations to landscaping and that drive path. There is currently a drive that goes there, but it's not as wide or as landscaped as what we're showing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chinook.
Go ahead.
Ms. Harder.
Thank you. You were mentioning share uses with the condo as well as with the hotel. Maybe I think you were mentioning exercise and things of that sort. What about safety? How does that connect from someone who lives there to someone who's coming in and staying a few days?
So the best example, and it's a Marriott example. Marriott operates Ritz-Carlton. So you might have seen Ritz-Carlton hotels and residents. And in an autograph series, it would be the exact same setup. Now, the sort of safety points is what we call it in the hotel planning, is obviously your front desk and positioning of that front desk to control access points to vertical circulation, elevators and stairs. Of course, there's key cards. Of course, there's security in the building. But for the condominium, there's a concierge for the condominium. So they basically have their own front desk as well. Plus, all of the entry point for vehicle from a condo level parking has direct elevator right up into their tower. So they can come down into the lobby and enjoy the hotel functions, but they also could just go right from a car right to their unit. The shared amenity concept is actually a really nice marketable component for the condominiums, because like you mentioned, there's spas, there's aquatic space, there's fitness space. I'm sure there'll be some enhanced program offered to the restaurants or the cocktail lounge. for the residents. But that's looked at as part of the benefit for being a property owner, is you have the added amenities that come along with a five-star hotel.
Just to add to that, when you were thinking about HOA and cost of that sort, if you're sharing it, does that give you any benefit? Just talking out loud.
Maybe.
I just draw the pictures.
Mr. Way.
I just had a question because there's a bunch of labels on your documents that have to do with the Montgomery Inn. It says future development, the other says to be demolished. You're making some heroic moves with this site to respect that site that's going to be demolished. And I just wondered, had you thought of, might that change in the future, or?
Yeah, that was, as I was sitting here, I'm like, that was the one thing I forgot to talk about, is specifically Montgomery Inn. So that building has sat empty for a long time. We have tried unsuccessfully for years to lease it for a variety of reasons. It does need to come down. We want to do something there that is complementary to this development. It's likely a residential project in nature. It's likely 4 or 5 stories. That's all I know at this point. It's because the development timeline of this hotel is so much longer than a simple residential building. We're trying to get a little bit out ahead on this one. But the intention would be that this all gets built basically at the same time. So it may be that we would come with another informal, perhaps at the concept plan stage, we would have something there to share with you.
Great. And again, just 2 other little questions. Great presentation, by the way. I had 100 questions and you've answered most of them. There's this really quirky, cool little connection that comes from Riverside Drive up to the River Ridge that doesn't exist anymore in this plan. And I just wondered, is there any plan to create a pedestrian connection from the sidewalk and Riverside Drive up to the shops?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the secret is going to be, because routing through the building is tough. On the south end, we just want to make that experience the right way and not like you're going through the service drive.
Exactly.
So I think I'd like to try to get everyone to find their way to the north side, and then through if we can go to the green plan, where all these kind of spaghetti pieces are coming together in the motor court of the front. I think that's going to be a really cool little pedestrian park with, great opportunities for all kinds of unique things. So that's the route we'd kind of like to draw people through.
But there's a population to the south along Riverside Drive that want to come up and see this project, go to the shops.
Yeah.
And that, I assume that they were using that connection to get up there as opposed to walking all the way around.
Sure. And that's where I was saying to Jamie, is between Riverside Drive and the west side of the building. I think there's some opportunities where we can plug into the building and maybe find our way through public spaces to weave through the property. So for folks coming from the south, it's not walk 2 miles to, get around.
Or walking through the service drive, like
through it.
Yeah. And then that's great. Just again, something that I noticed. The pedestrian bridge you said was designed for ADA access, and that's why it's all windy. Would bikes be using the pedestrian bridge also? And that's also creating a slope that they can navigate?
When Structure Point studied it, they studied it as a multi-use.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
The other thing the reason why I came back up here that I also wanted to mention, something that we are interested in doing, because obviously it's the bridge is a pipe dream right now. We don't, we think it's a great idea. There's a lot more thinking that has to go into it, including how to pay for it. One of the things that we think would be really interesting if we can go, perhaps for state capital funds as an example, is if with the support of Dublin, of this commission, but also Dublin at large, if there's a way that we can get this wrapped into connecting the multi-use path that stops at Martin Road and then picks up in front of Friendship Village, we would love to see if we could wrap those 2 things together and just finish the connection.
I'm glad you brought that up, but that was way out of our remit, so I didn't want to say anything about it. But that's a missing gap, and it absolutely
is.
So that would be great.
So
yeah.
it's on our radar.
Yeah, fabulous.
And I do know there has been previous discussion closer to, but, you mentioned before that roundabout is, I'm going to say challenging, and that's not the word that I want to use, but we're in a public meeting.
It teaches you how to drive well.
Yes, yes, and reminiscent of the roundabouts in Paris that are like 20 aisles deep. Has there been any additional studies with your friends in adjacent agencies, let's say, to look at if there's an opportunity for tunnel type, maybe further to the east, rather than a pedestrian visible crossing that distracts from an already contentious, let's say, vehicular navigation path?
So the answer is no. It was the study that we did with Structure Point was very, very limited in scope. Would we be amenable to that? Absolutely. I think the point was not we need a bridge. The point was we need a safe way to get across 161. And our fear is that there's no amount of things that we're going to be able to, like, there's too many lanes and we're never going to be able to have less lanes from that connection between Dale and the roundabout. And so there's really nothing I think we're going to be able to do from an engineering standpoint on the surface to make that a good crossing. So you're going under or you're going over. I don't know what's the right answer. I think that hopefully that's something we can study as a part of that study. We just know we need something.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. All right, looking back to the commission for questions, Mr. Schneier.
Zach, could you put up the view, the rendering from the roundabout? Yeah, Chris, I think you stated it well. There's a dilemma here. It's a gateway, but it has the issue of it's the visibility from the roundabout and the traffic from the roundabout. On one hand, because it is a gateway, we want something very visible, but for safety reasons, it can't be too visible. At this point, can you articulate, is this a two-story window facing?
Yeah, let me describe this view a little better, because the basic model that you're seeing doesn't really demonstrate terrain. This is more of what we'd call a step model. So I'm going to start you from the curb at Riverside Drive. This is on the left-hand side. Where you see the green of, we'll call it landscape, hit that first plate, that's deceiving because I think the landscape is actually going to mount to the top of that because that's that podium level of the building. So imagine as you're looking at the southeast corner of the roundabout, a sort of a cascading landscape that comes up to the base of the building. And then where that wedge piece, which is the restaurant, that's a two-story window looking into the full restaurant dining space, which probably has a mezzanine in it. So 2 stories, but right at the window is probably a 2-story volume. Two floors, but a 2-story volume. The restaurant concept, I'm sure, will be very elegant and subtle, not bright flashing lights and big distraction. That's just the nature of Cameron's brand that is I think, being developed. The terraces that are all around it are also purposely smaller in scale. So you have activity for small groups, but it's not a whole wedding event is standing out on the corner and big party going on. So we're trying to create this active facade that's not an overwhelming facade for the drivers. It's a balancing act between how do you make an iconic piece of architecture, because that is one of your iconic spots in your community, but not so iconic that it creates traffic accidents. So there's going to be a lot of collaboration amongst engineering and landscape design, and actually even all the way into the interior design of that space, because it has to be, subtly elegant to not create a distraction or a problem.
Thank you. And then on the north part of the roundabout to get across, like where One Medical, so there's a pedestrian walkway on the northern part, which is not your parcel. And it's not very pedestrian friendly. When you cross,
Right.
you go up steps, you go around. Let's say you, assuming there's a pedestrian access across the roundabout south over Riverside, where will a pedestrian, what's the level, and then where will a pedestrian sort of end?
So in that,
So-
call it a slight hill coming up to the base of our building, that's where I said that red perimeter that, I said, don't be deceived, it's not going to just be a sidewalk. We really have to create a strong connected pathway that ties into all of your existing network.
Yeah.
I really think a lot of what we're going to do for pedestrian connection here might actually go off-site a little bit and to some of their other properties and say, hey, to get this to work here, we might have to make a little adjustment where there's steps or slopes or things like that. But there's a very strong pedestrian effort in Bridge Park, in the park across the street, that we really have to make that a critical piece of our tie-in. This basic red line that you see around here, I think is going to have a lot of transitions for slope, entry points into the building, but also making it convenient for residents from the south or even from the west, making their way over in the safest way possible. The crosswalks that are on 161 right now, especially the ones closest to the roundabout, I'm sorry, they're just not very safe. And
I agree.
The further we go east, the better they get. But, what we see is human nature is people are impatient. And so what happens is they don't want to wait and they just start running across. So that's what prompted the pedestrian bridge. I love the idea of a tunnel, but those ideas are at their infancy. And to make sure that safety is important. Now, the developer of this project is the developer of Bridge Park. They want this strong connection between the two. The restaurants in Bridge Park and these restaurants, they work very well together. So that connection is I think, going to be critically important.
As you move north, the crosswalks get better, but as you
Right,
move north
because the confusion in a roundabout, it's another thing to be looking for as a pedestrian. So you're right. The further east or west or north get better because the driver has more time to be focusing on other things besides maneuvering the roundabout.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Supalack.
Follow up on a few different questions, and I agree, kudos on your presentation, because again, I had a longer list of questions, but you guys sort of snapped through a number of them. But one fundamental question, and I'm not sure where we're going to see it, but help me understand and specifically on the north side, help me understand the limits of the parking garage underneath. Is it just with the building masses that come out, or does it extend?
You see
far-
that, I wish I had we have a parking plan I could have shown you. You see the rounded gray, what looks like a wall, where we were saying the landscape would go up to that? That is the utility portions of serving the restaurant and stuff from underneath. From right that vertical face of the hotel where it says 2 through 7, that's the sort of the boundary edge of the parking from there all the way south, all the way to the back.
And forgive me, I misspoke. I didn't necessarily mean the north side. I meant actually this east side that we're looking at on the right image.
Same thing. You see where the gray of that motor court, you see how it doesn't show the Boulevard Drive?
Yeah, you have that the two-tone and the gray. So
so
that
that's
sort of motor court.
Yeah, that's the vertical wall that you're seeing of the garage.
Got it. So it's largely just under the building.
Yeah, so the porte cochere, the motor court, the drop-off is on the lid of the garage.
Oh, all right. So it does extend almost here to, I'm going to say the parcel line.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we get
The entirety of
350 cars.
Yeah, okay.
when we come back, I'm going to show you all the detailed parking plans, and I think it'll be clear.
I'm sure, I wrote down at some point, right, relative to, oh my goodness, you guys have a lot of assembly use here. Where's all that parking to it? And you touched on, yeah, we've pushed our way through that. So I recognize that you're fighting through the volume of that in real regard. I applaud, you guys do good work. You're doing a lot of really good things here on a rather, I'm going to say complicated and hairy site. I applaud a wealth of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to even mitigate relative to the stepping of the platforming of the terraces on the side, right? Sort of distancing and tempering the roundabout. The slot, again, I appreciate that, compelling voids make for an interesting corner, and you guys are effectively sort of made an interesting corner relative to the sort of gateway desire here on this site, right? This is a hairy intersection or not, this is sort of a critical and iconic intersection here in Dublin. I applaud the massing sort of, you've broken it down, right, quite a bit, and even sort of stepped towards the southern side of the city in a really nice way. It still has a number of sort of issues. And I'm going to sort of touch on one. I think we're dancing all around.
Did you want to hold deliberation until after we hear public comment? Just a little bit ahead.
Yes, I do.
He keeps me on my toes.
I do.
Keep him on his toes.
No,
all
that's
right.
good.
Any other questions from the commission for either staff or the applicant? Ms. Harder.
I just had a quick question to clarify the drone that went up, just to, it sounded like you worked with one resident with, a variance of their house. I didn't know if there was several along the way. That could be a little bit more clearer to me to understand.
Yeah. So we had folks on the River Ridge side, so like in the parking lot, and then I was with Tom. There were several, probably half a dozen neighbors, all on Martin Place. And we kind of went from, there were a bunch of different backyards, just really, to be honest, when we first started just trying to see the silly thing. And then because at first, this is funny. At first we thought, okay, we're just going to fly the balloons. And we thought it was a relatively not windy day. Well, it was windy enough that they were just kind of flying like that, and that didn't really do us any good. So that's when we brought the drone out. Drone, obviously, it has the GPS that allows us to see how tall it is, so we just tied up all the balloons to the top of the drone. So that's how we were able to do it. But like I said, I mean, was it a comprehensive thing? No, but there was probably a half a dozen folks out there.
So did you feel like they could see it from their homes? I guess that's the bottom question.
Yeah, so
and we will have time for public comment, and we've received public comment. So Mr. Hunter, could you just go over what your community engagement has been thus far for this particular project?
Yes. So there's really been 2 meetings so far. The first was we reached out to Tom. At the zoning meeting, he was here, gave us his card, so we reached out to him. He was the one that talked to some of his other neighbors, so we just communicated through him for the first drone flight. And like I said, that was early enough that we didn't have all these drawings yet. So what we really did there was just simply say, how tall do we have to be in the air before we can see these balloons? And that's where I was mentioning it was about 140 feet, but it was in the extreme opposite part of the site. So it was the southeastern part of the site. And then as we flew the drone west, sort of disappeared behind the trees and got difficult to see. There were times when we could see it through the trees, but again, it was well over 140 feet in the air at that point before we could see it on the western side. And that's why I suggested to them. So the second one was Vaso, where we actually showed them. This was just a couple of weeks ago. We showed everybody.
Last week.
Oh, was it just last week? We showed everybody the same presentation that you saw tonight, answered some more questions, and also offered, hey, now that we've got a building, we feel pretty confident that you can't see any of this site from Martin Place or any of those residences. let's go out there and let's send the drone back up to the specific heights that we're talking about.
So the other benefit right now is when the first drone flight was done, there were still some leaves on trees. And so now we specifically know where buildings are being proposed and what height. And also it's probably the extreme of visibility because there's less leaves on the trees.
Thank you. Mr. Suplak.
Yeah, forgive me. Going back to the terraces while you both are there, and I guess it's early, but I've heard some forethought about landscaping on the, let's just say the Riverside end, intent to do landscaping, robust landscaping along the Riverside and roundabout side. I've heard, right, pitching up to at least the first level of the terrace. In the drawings, right, there's a couple of different languages. Again, it's early, it's not figured out, but there's sometimes those terraces are shown as, a hatch that implies a hardscape, but largely hardscape. Other drawings, and we haven't seen them in the city's presentation, but they are in your drawings. I'm specifically going to, right, you got a page 11 that shows there's sort of a blue background, if you're familiar. They show green across those same terraces with sort of some trees and those types of things. So I guess I'm relative, and I hear how you intend to use them, right?
Yeah,
They'll
I'll admit, don't read too far into the green or the gray or the hatch at this point.
Got it.
It's more, do we have interior space, exterior space? How do we shape and mass the building? But our next step with your feedback is with our landscape architects, and how do we kind of transition streetscape to landscape design, to landscape within building, and hardscape within building, to interior design. So that seamless transition of all of those things hasn't really gotten underway yet, but we see it as a really important way to tie this use of this building into its site and its overall context.
Got it.
Thank you.
And I think MKS did pretty much all of Bridge Park.
They've done all of Bridge Park.
I think they did your park too.
Yeah.
They're okay.
Well, there was a certain amount of the way these drawings that I just, again, you didn't see in the cities, the way they reference, they kind of come across as, I guess I'm going to Italian, like a stepped platform, green hill going up, right?
Which might be a great idea to develop. I'll tell you, I just don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, duly noted. Thank you.
All right. Any final questions from the commission? Thank you very much. We have received public comment prior to the meeting, so I will turn it over to staff to read that into the record. Some of the Planning and Zoning Commission members were unable to access those comments, so then we will turn it over to anyone who wants to speak to public comment after those are read in. Ms. Roush.
Great, thank you. So I was able to forward those to you all because one of them has some graphics, but I will read the content of all of them, so you have that for your benefit. So the first one is from Dan Kendall at 6725 Hobbs Landing Drive East here in Dublin. As a bicyclist, I appreciate the pedestrian bridge to Bridge Park. Please adopt a slope and width which will accommodate all modes of non-vehicular transportation. Please integrate it into the existing public multi-use trail and sidewalks north and south of East Dublin Granville Road. While the roundabout keeps vehicles flowing, the roundabout is literally a safety barrier to non-vehicular traffic. While the height necessary for a better bridge seems challenging, the grade up and east to Wendy's restaurant and the Acura dealer could provide creative opportunities. Please expand this bridge from a hotel amenity to a neighborhood amenity. It will open your property and the shops at River Ridge to to casual explorations by Bridge Park visitors. And then I have, let's see here. Sorry, there's two from the same person, so I'm gonna provide that all at once. So this is then from Tony Kirschner at 3275 Lilymar Court in Dublin. As a nearby resident of the proposed site, I am certainly interested in seeing this vacant land be developed, but would like to be sure several important concerns are considered, starting with the positive. Besides putting a vacant lot to great use, the addition of a pedestrian bridge that crossing 161 without navigating the roundabout is a terrific and necessary part of the project. I would assume it would be accessible to the public, not just residents and guests, and be bike, stroller, wheelchair accessible and friendly. I also hope this would help to revitalize the surrounding shops at River Ridge, specifically the Montgomery Inn site, which has been vacant for far too long. Some concerns I have will hopefully be considered and addressed. The height of the building, specifically the condo structure, I hope will not be too great as to loom over the neighborhoods to the south, such as Sunnydale Estates where I live. I would also be concerned about the increased traffic, making the intersection of Martin and Riverside even more problematic than it currently is. I would hope that the city code would require that the retention pond that would need to be removed is studied and no issues would be caused as a result of it. I'm also curious about the demand for hotels in this area, with several already operating in the area and another planned on the north side of Bridge Park, the Indus project. I am curious if the demand for hotels and event space in this area justifies this. And then the same resident provided a follow-up comment. I apologize for submitting 2 comments on this project, but in my first comment, I commended the inclusion of a pedestrian bridge in the proposal. However, I missed the very last sentence that mentions the bridge would not be connected to the existing pedestrian network. To me, this is a complete non-starter. This type of gatekeeping accomplishes the exact opposite of making a district walkable and pedestrian-friendly environment that is supposed to be one of the district's primary objectives. I hope that this project can move forward and include a pedestrian bridge or tunnel that is accessible to all, but it would be a shame to include one that does not, include one that only serves this specific development. And then a comment from Hillary Kirschner at 6400 Braxmar Place here in Dublin. Hello, my family lives around the corner from the proposed condo and hotel complex, and we regularly use the roads, walkways, and adjoining commercial areas. We really like the idea of a pedestrian bridge over Dublin-Granville Road and hope that pedestrian bridges are added across 161 and Riverside Drive regardless of what happens with this case. We also are not opposed to the site, how the site will be used, though we're surprised there's a need for another hotel. However, we are a bit concerned about the height of the proposed buildings, the environmental impact, and the volume of traffic it will add to the area, especially around rush hour. What can be done to the plans to ensure the following? 1, that any increase in traffic will be mitigated on all surrounding roads. It is nearly impossible for our neighborhood to turn left onto Riverside Drive from Martin Road as it is, and additional traffic would force us to take much longer routes and add more traffic down Martin. 2, that the buildings are not taller than the existing buildings. Any more height in the area might lose its charm. We don't mind the expansion of Bridge Park as long as the outer edges blend a bit better into the surrounding neighborhoods. 3, that the site has maximum green space and public use area. Additionally, please consider revising the plans to minimize the amount of reflective glass and light so that it is to be more bird and wildlife friendly. There's a ton of wildlife from foxes to bald eagles in this area and would hate to see that diminished. Thank you for considering our comments, Hillary and Dan Kirschner. And then we also then had a significant amount of public comment from Robert Smith, and he is at 6310 Riverside Drive. His included a series of photos and attachments, which is what I forwarded to you all via email. So again, his large concerns relate to similar to the previous. Hello, Jenny, please share with the commission. I am planning on being at the meeting. I will also send photos of the traffic backup, which I took yesterday. So he provided some photos of traffic that backs up in front of his property from the roundabout. So that was included in your packet. He also then provided some additional information about concerns he has related to his driveway location, which I'll maybe let Thad speak to some of these other items should they come up. He also then included some exhibits and photos of his shared access drive with the Stanley Law Office and concerns about that. Let's see here, what else? Additional photos from rush hour starting at 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. That then are taken from his driveway, which again causing concerns about what traffic looks like. Additionally, an email then yesterday, early evening traffic on Riverside at his property. It also backs up heading south from the roundabout in the morning. Semi-trucks are a bottleneck stopper using the roundabout. Please share with the commission. Sorry. I believe that's all that I have at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Roush. All right, the time is now yours. Anyone in attendance who would like to share public comment, if you would please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and then we welcome you up.
I'm attorney Karen Edwards Smith. I'm here on behalf of River Park Group, which is the property just to the south of the shop's properties. Their concern is with the traffic and the roundabout and access being just through Dale Drive, which is one lane each way. And it's how it will affect backing up traffic heading south on Riverside Drive, which blocks their entrance to their condominium project. And they believe there should be an additional means of access besides just Dale Drive, which is one lane each way off of 161. It's going to be a backup that's worse than what it is now. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know if you stated your address for the record. If I could have you do that, please.
My address is 6310 Riverside Drive.
Thank you very much. And I apologize if I missed that. Hello and welcome.
Hi, my name is Gail Griffith. I live at 6465 Martin Place. And I've had a couple of nice get-togethers with Mr. Hunter and one with Mr. Myers, and they've been very helpful at explaining what they're planning. I'm just sitting out here and I have some of the same concerns of other people who have made their comments known, but I just wanted to say with the level of technology that exists for these beautiful graphics and all, can that little drone go up there and take a photograph of what it would be in the southeast corner of the hotel and the southeast corner of the condos? What would that look like going down into my swimming pool yard? I mean, is that techno? Because that would be great, and I appreciate that you're willing to redo that experiment once the deciduous trees have lost their leaves. That'll take care of a lot of my fears. But my remaining concerns are probably going to be noise and light pollution, because I'm one of the closest neighbors to the proposed property. But it sounds lovely, and who wouldn't want to be within walking distance of a Cameron Mitchell restaurant?
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Herring. I live at 3280 Lily Mar Court. I'm glad to hear we got comments from all throughout the Martin Road corridor, namely the Martin Place and Braxmar, which is the access into the Lily Mar Loop. So I got to say, I'm a little frustrated at the process. Someone used the word process tonight. I was in this room back in March. It seemed rather abrupt. City Council said, we have a request to rezone this parcel, but there's no particular project. Now tonight, someone said there was a proposal for that, so that troubles me. But prior to March, I was told that the zoning allowed structures up to 5 stories. Despite several residents' testimony, including mine, council then decided to rezone that parcel. And I was assured, the audience was assured, that this new zoning would have more protections, more review, and that 6 stories really isn't so bad. I got to admit, this is neat. I like your project and building it into the hill, and this is much neater than I anticipated. God bless America. The property owner is entitled to build on this lot. My neighbors who ask, is this economically viable? Do we need a hotel? Well, that's way beyond P&Z scope. So if you got the money, you can build it. I think it just boils down to me that if the law says 6 stories is the maximum, then that needs to be it. And I had a whole statement prepared, and I'm going to have to greatly abbreviate it. But just as a history lesson, in the 25 years that I've lived here in Dublin, planning and zoning has been tenacious on any number of topics. And I was going to give more details. Signage, one meeting where everyone was red-faced because a not-for-profit business had put up a 4-color sign. Another meeting, red faces, almost shouting. A business wanted to deviate from the cedar shakes that were required in the Dublin Village Center. P&Z said, no, you've got to follow the law. More recently, I saw an apartment project that was limited. That parcel was limited to 3 stories. A developer said, it's just not economically viable unless if you let me have 4. Thank goodness that got squashed. So 6 stories, that's what you're going to have to work with. There is currently a sidewalk along the Riverside Drive, and I've used that. Everything looks neat about this, but I think the word was the crescendo at the north end. Yeah, that's going to have to be trimmed up. Because I think I heard 130 feet, right? So that's what, 11 stories at 12 and a half, 13 feet tall. That is one heck of a shadow. And in the mornings, that's going to cast a shadow almost onto the water's edge. That'd be my guess. That's a mighty tall wall. So that's where I'm stuck. If the law says 6 stories maximum, that needs to be the primary goal. I think that was question number 1. Will this mass and scale, will this height be allowed? That's my interpretation. If the law says 6, then it's going to have to be 6. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. And I would invite you, if you did have a prepared statement, to provide it to staff. This is not the last time the Planning and Zoning Commission will see this, nor are we the only body that will see this. So I would invite you to provide that to them and they can get it to us. Others for public comment?
Good evening. Did I need to press something here?
No, you're good.
Okay.
It's on right now.
Thank you for opening it to a public comment. My name is Diane Cardilano. My husband, Joe, and I live at 3390 Martin Road. We are immediately adjacent to Stanley Law Group. So we've lived on that corner in that area for 23 years. And as all of you know who are from Dublin, pardon me, that area has experienced a lot of change. Most of it good, some of it not so great. But of course, the roundabout, my daughters and I, we would walk up there and we jokingly call it the walk of death with our dogs. So, I think we all know that it is, a problem. So anyway, I have a lot on my mind. I will try to consolidate it. So I just hope to bring a little bit different perspective. We are, when you're coming south from the roundabout and you turn left onto Martin Road, you have the law firm and we're the very next house there. So we actually face Martin Road. So my office faces out of there. And I used to sit on my front porch every morning to read. And for the last 2 years, the covers have not even been taken off of the chairs out there because the traffic has increased. I enjoy the amenities at Bridge Park. I go for coffee just about every morning. But the process of it was horrific with the increased traffic, the speed bumps once they were modified. Forgive me for being blunt, but they're essentially useless. Again, I'm at my desk a lot, unfortunately. But and I call. They have put speed wagons there on occasion, but it's just it's a temporary, it's a Band-Aid. But so the traffic, the speed. Even with and for the record, we were not invited nor aware of the meetings that have been referenced and would appreciate being included in those in the future. So let's see. So even if the line of sight is a concern, if that's addressed, you still have the noise. The construction process just, is almost mind-boggling to you know, I have an open invitation to any of you to come and sit at my house with me for coffee for a couple of hours, just, you know, to watch the traffic flow and to experience that. It has, you know, really changed the whole atmosphere of our home. You know, I appreciate the fact that you're concerned about surrounding communities and neighbors and so forth, but, you know, it's just hard to sit and, you know, even if you can't see it, we can already hear events from Bridge Park in our backyard. We back up to the Griffiths backyard, our property does. So, you know, so the traffic, you know, the footbridge, I would like to see something under. I've even had the radical thought of closing Martin Road from Riverside. It's very difficult and dangerous to turn south from Martin Road. And I see a lot of head nodding, you know, with regard to that. So, you know, so I hope that you give as much consideration to those of us who live there and have been impacted by the development. Again, there's been a lot of positive to the development, but the process is really, really difficult to live through. And there's not a lot of oversight and monitoring, you know, of the traffic, you know, unless Dublin police officer sits there 24/7, you know, because people speed all the time. So I don't know if there's any possibility of modifying the speed bumps again, making them a little more severe, because it does not really do much to slow things down, or even to install a speed limit sign that has the digitized speed. Just put, you know, those there permanently. Plus line of sight when you're coming north on Riverside and turn right onto Martin Road. That speed limit sign is just right, you know, people miss it. And there are only 2 speed limit signs on the entire road. So, and again, most people don't heed them anyway. So again, I don't know how I'm imagining that, you know, if whatever the project ends up being, you know, the construction process is going to be pretty long. And I'm a little bit confused too. It seems like with the announcement, you know, there was a press release about the project. It seems like it's almost a foregone conclusion. So I'm a little unclear as to the purpose of these meetings, because I saw survey stakes. I walk you know, that path 2 to 3 times a day with my dog. So, and I do use the little quirky, you know, access up to the shops. So, all right, let me just check my notes here, if you don't mind. So if you could clarify that, you know, why it seems that there are things that are already happening, and, you know, that this isn't for nothing, that, you know, that you do give some weight and consideration to those of us who live there. So, okay, that was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Cardilano. Did I get that correct? Okay. And we will address the process discussion once all the public comment is done. So if you want to stick around and hear those comments. Anyone else for public comment on this item? Welcome, sir. Please state your name and address for the record when you arrive at the podium.
My name is Tony Crooks, and my address is 3330 Kendall Marie Way, which is just off Martin Road. Now, there are a couple of concerns that I have. Firstly, I have not seen or heard of a traffic study as to the impact once this building goes up. I certainly am concerned about what it might look like during construction and after construction. We've seen when the roundabout needs repairs, traffic is rerouted onto Martin Road. It's a nightmare. And I'd certainly not like to see that happen again with that construction that I'm sure will take place. Secondly, it's the problem of visibility in the roundabout. That's a nightmare, as I think we all agree, trying to navigate that at certain times of the day. It just seems to me that we need to have adequate visibility on all sides approaching that roundabout, both looking sort of going north on Riverside Drive, looking up the hill, I need to see the traffic that's coming down to be able to safely navigate in and around that roundabout. I haven't seen anything in the presentations that addresses the issue of the angle of visibility that we'll have traveling into that roundabout. I'd certainly like to see a study on that. And thirdly, I've enjoyed walking along there. I'd hate to see that space used in any other way but as a beautiful green space. It's wonderful to walk there, to sit, to look at the traffic going back and forth. And I would certainly propose to the council that we take a good hard look at putting things like park benches, a rose garden, something that we can all enjoy as residents of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the audience? Going once, going twice. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So I do want to address just a couple of the comments before we go to deliberation, just as far as the process goes. So my comments before about Dublin being, oh, what nice words did I use, detail-oriented. Just because something comes out in a press release or just because someone announces that they're going to build something, it does not make it so. And so if we have, we had public comment, I don't remember who it was, maybe Mr. Herring talked about the apartment building that came before us and they said, hey, we want this. And well, we said no. And that's pretty much the end of it. So the process, as Mr. Hounshell went over at the very beginning, this is an informal review. Thank you very much. So this is step 0 in a 4-step process. And really what you're looking at is just the Planning and Zoning Commission process. The process is actually much greater than this. There's the negative numbers where they're working directly with the planning staff. And then there are the numbers above 3, which means it goes to City Council for their review. Because this is administrative in nature, the rezoning has already happened, then we're kind of hybriding there. But to some other comments, if they deviate from what the zoning allows for, then there would be waivers required. And so this body would have to grant those waivers and then forward a recommendation if it deviates from what's acceptable in this area. There have been other parcels specifically in this particular corridor that have been granted waivers. And if you're interested, I would encourage you, those are all public records, so you can go back and you can see the types of waivers that have been considered and the types of waivers that have actually been granted, which are 2 totally different sets of waivers. So speaking to the process, that's kind of the process. And then, of course, tonight, meeting 0, we heard from staff, we heard from the applicant, and then part of the process is we hear from you on whether that's virtual comments Ms. Roush read into the record or you're being present. And the process continues. So next meeting, when we're at the concept plan, we still invite you to come forward. If you remember something, you can forward the comment or you can participate in the meeting so that we can hear your feedback. And our body, as well as City Council, encourages that communication. We're only as good as we are together. So we thank you for coming this evening. It does help us make better decisions when we hear from you, so thank you. At this time, we're entering into deliberation. So we have heard all of the presentation and all of the comments, and then the commission has been challenged with 3 questions by staff. And then, of course, number 4 is always the golden question of is there anything else we can think of as a body? And so we will go through, for those of you who were here at the earlier meeting, there's no like question number 1 that everything hangs on that and everything else becomes moot. We will consider all of these questions together. So Mr. Chinook, can I start off with you today? And then if we could have the questions kind of guide our discussion as we enter into deliberation, and we'll circle back around and we'll end with myself, but Mr. Schneer.
Perfect.
Mr. Schindler.
Thank you again. I echo the comments about having the public come in. We really appreciate it. We do, I speak for all of us to say we do take into account those comments. So it's very important to us as a commission to hear those comments. So again, thank you for coming in and sharing those. I think for me, for number one, the general supportive of the proposed use, we've talked about earlier, a lot of thought went into it, which we really appreciate. I think it's a great use of the space, of the site. But we brought up concerns. I'm going to jump ahead because it's kind of hard to talk to without jumping ahead. There are some concerns with which we've talked about: pedestrian safety, pedestrian access. Really think it is important that it's a shared, especially for pedestrian trails. And if there is a bridge over 161 or some access across 161 that is open to the public, not just for the residents or those staying at the hotel. So I think that's very important. And I've brought up a couple times too, just general access to the site for vehicular access as well. You see a plan like this, and I think you even used the term spaghetti earlier. It makes you a little bit nervous. And we're very preliminary, so we know it's going to be thought out a lot more. But we'd like to see some more detail on that, how that's going to work. Again, those turning radius, and make sure that it's fully accessible. Which, again, we know it will be, but that would just be my kind of take. But overall, very supportive of it. And again, thank you so much for the thought and consideration that went into the presentation and the viewpoints and everything you presented tonight.
Ms. Harder.
Thank you to the applicants for you all being here and giving such a nice presentation. I came after hearing you all, I got a better idea about the whole picture. I'm also leaving with some questions and so forth like that. But I think with us all moving forward, I think that things will kind of help out that way. But I do have some concerns. First of all, you have a great access with the number of residents you have around that area. They have been part of this procedure and connection from day one. Probably before we were all thinking about Bridge Street, they were thinking about this. So, and I think that they can give you some guidance about the importance of some good connectability because they're walking the streets every day. They also have the idea of the safety issues. And then they also have the amenities, some of the things that they think that would be very important. So I'm glad that you've reached out to them. It sounds like you need to reach out to them again, and you're willing to think through the leave situation and getting the drone out there that way. I am supportive of it, but I understand, when you are driving on Riverside, that is going to feel close and it's going to feel big. And so we can't diminish that thought as we're driving up that way. I also think about Martin Road, and that really we've limited the people that live back in there about turning left out of Riverside. And that may be something that the city can start kind of thinking about how to help them through that scenario. There's also a little bit of backing up in that area when you're trying to turn left onto Martin Road too, because you've had to merge, and there's a lot of things that are happening in that area. Also, I'm concerned, this whole project's going to need a lot of signage. When I start looking about which way, when I'm talking about your site, like here comes some, trucks and so forth go this way, and how do we make sure that drivers aren't just going that way? So it'll be interesting to see how all that kind of gets waved out and moved along. I do think landscaping is really going to be a prize figure here, because you have some opportunity from straight, narrow roads that'll kind of lead into this project, which could really look beautiful and really inviting, that people want to stay there and live there. I think that is a great opportunity there to keep in mind about the noise and what's happening, because I think when you're at Bridge Street, there's a lot of activity at certain times, and how's that going to flow there too? I really like rooftop access, so if there's opportunities for that, I think that's always a great, passionate way to move there. And then again, paying attention to the pedestrians and the connectability that's got to happen to make this side work, which is going to give really wonderful opportunities to all of our neighbors as well as the people that are living there. But if we start not making that easy for them or not safe for them, it's not going to, it's going to have a tough time. So let me make sure I've touched on my point. That's where I think about the word island. We don't want this to become an island. And I think by hearing you today, I think you see that picture too. And I respect that a lot. I do like tunnels, and if there was any way to do that, I think that's a great opportunity. Anytime you can get people over that way. I thank you for bringing this forward. It's a great opportunity. I thank the neighbors for being here because working together is going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harder. Mr. Way.
I'd like to thank the applicant for coming in and making a good presentation and really helping us understand the project. I'd like to thank the community for coming and offering your insight because, as my fellow commissioner said, we need to hear everything as we deliberate through this process. I think in general, it's really exciting to see this site change from what it is. I remember it when it was a Wendy's site, one of my favorite places to go. So it's really good to see investment being made, things changing. I think the nice thing about the proposal and the layout is how it starts to become an extension of Bridge Park and starts to finish off the Riverside edge in a way that I think makes sense. I think the transition of massing from north to south and starting to step down. And again, it's a complicated site in terms of the elevations. So how does 6 stories, max fit in, and how does that all work? I think we need to see more on that. But I think the massing, the way you've conceived it, of where it's stepping up from the south to the north, you're making a statement on the corner. It's starting to relate to the buildings on the north side of 161. All makes sense to me. How you're using the buildings to frame the corner. I take comments about visibility and all that. That's getting into details where we're not tonight, but we'll get there. The one thing about massing that I've been troubled with is the seam between the hotel and the event center. And as you look at the massing of Bridge Park and how it's broken up in segments, it seems like there's an opportunity to create another seam in the massing between the hotel block and the event center that would provide you kind of a window or something to break up that massing. So I think that's something that you could look at. And I love the break on the corner, and I love the idea of the view of the bridge. And I also keep thinking I'm coming around the roundabout looking into that slot, and what do I see? So there's some interesting kind of opportunities there in terms of the massing. I think the biggest thing for me, the thing that I've been struggling with, is the edge of Riverside Drive and what that's going to be like. And I think what it's like to the north and how it engages people, the pedestrian, and we have, that contiguous walkway, and this south of the roundabout, it's going to be a different experience. And I think I understand that it's a much more traffic-oriented experience. You're not going to change the character of that approach to the roundabout. So is it a whole different landscape than approach like you've talked about? Really interested in seeing that. But I really think that connectivity of the walkway along Riverside Drive, and the neighbors have talked about that connectivity. And I think north-south, we need to keep that connection. I'd also like to find some connection across Riverside Drive to the river and to Kiwanis Park and all that, because that's a missing link, I think, in the city right now. And also the connection that I mentioned, the quirky connection that connects up to the shops. I think that needs to be thought through a little bit, because I can see the residents probably have been using that for years, and I wouldn't want to see that go away. It can be handled in a lot of different ways, but I think that connectivity is really important. And that is all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Mr. Supalack.
I'm going to echo my commissioners. Forgive me for all the first names here. Russ and Chris, thank you. It's good work. You are thorough. You give us all the information we need. Dan, and I hope I get everybody, Dan, Tony, Hillary and Dan, Robert, Karen, Gail, Scott, Diane and Joe, and then the second Tony. Appreciate the commentary. It's always wonderful to hear from the community and sort of digest these things with everybody involved. I was starting to touch on my comments earlier. There is a wealth of good, I think, in the project. I feel like it might have been Scott even said it's neat, right? There's a lot of neat in it. You are trying to solve with a very complicated site with a lot of complicated factors. And doing so with a wealth of sensitivity on various fronts, right? The breakup and the stepping of the massing, again, I'm going to touch back on that. That's applaudable. What you're trying to do, and that sensitivity, I think, will prove really pertinent on this site. The negative corners is compelling. The landscape, the terracing and the landscape and how that potentially needs to get developed is potentially really, really compelling. Ms. Harder using a word earlier, she said island. I had written, right, my worry, and I imagine it's your worry too. There's a potential, this unlike the rest of Bridge Park, has a very cruise ship quality to it, right? Once you arrive, your car disappears, you're walking up and down this concourse, you're never really leaving this building, right? You might go to the rail on the top and look out, right, and look down on the roundabout, but that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like how we would experience it. So I worry therein that it really isn't meshing for all the good things and all the sensitivity you guys are doing. The worry is it's not meshing with the fabric very well, which I think people are clamoring for ways up from Riverside. And there was even some articulation that is it a bridge, it is a tunnel, how do we get across 161, right? And don't get me wrong, that's a kerfuffle in and of itself, but it's also then how do we get across Riverside Drive in a really meaningful way, right? Those connections for us as a city, I mean, yes, they seem like they're fantastically important relative to this site and everything around it, right? I think the sensitivity was raised about connection all the way down to some things south on Martin relative to pedestrian ways or well past. I think all those, unfortunately, those are the things that will really make this great, right? And not a sort of cruise ship feel that's very esoteric and very sort of, I'm going to, forgive me, very self-centered. I even worry it's not really connected in a meaningful way that would cause me to walk back and forth to the rest of the shops that are up there, up on that platform. So that's all to say. I see in it a wealth of good moves. I also worry that it's not going to be as successful as any of us wants it to be, is what it comes down to. The mixed use is great. Forgive me, one of the Karens articulated the walking distance. Another Cameron Mitchell restaurant would be lovely for all of us, right? I do worry that it is the massing, and despite the breakup and despite all of it, it is overbuilt, and therein, right, it's leading to this on the footprint, this overbuilt on the footprint that doesn't allow some of the life to breathe out and into these other areas, that doesn't allow some of these pedestrian connection points up and through. I very much hope we more holistically consider the Montgomery Inn site relative to all this. I mean, that relaxes things, right? Taking some stories off relaxes things, allows some of these other things to really come to fruition in meaningful ways, and start to really be part of the fabric in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sublak. Mr. Schneer.
Going towards the end means it's tough to come up with anything new or novel, but my fellow commissioners stated it well. I do want to myself again thank the applicant and the public comment. That was a very thorough and helpful exercise. I think it's an exciting project. I think it's a great addition to both Bridge Park, and the types of uses make it, I think, a great addition to the city. I'll just repeat, I like the use of the word island because that conjures up something I think we're all concerned about. And the other is, the other touchstone to me is pedestrian. There's a focus on the north-south, connection to the north part of Bridge Park. And you're bounded, by the roundabout, by Riverside, but attention to the east-west. How we get, it's our problem, the royal we, because it's the city's issue as much or perhaps even more than it is the applicant's issue. But access across Riverside, access to the park, the pedestrian, the crosswalks on the roundabout, it's just going to be exacerbated by this project. So whatever you can do, I am concerned about this sort of monolith, sort of drawbridge sort of image of pedestrians and how they get to this, the Emerald City up on the hill, from more so from Riverside than from 161. So the attention to how this lays out on against the roundabout and the different levels, and how we integrate more an important access for pedestrians on all sides. I mean, I'd rather see a bridge or another tunnel under Riverside than Dublin Granville, but that's because I think it's just that isolated and that much of a problem. But great start, and I wish you the best. We'll help you.
Mr. Supelak.
Forgive me, I'm circling back. I did want to supplement a number of folks had a concern about traffic. And I just wanted to supplement the chair's sort of commentary. There is a process here. This is very early. Part of the process is always a traffic study and coordination with the city engineering department. That is a standard issue step. And then there was also a comment about concern for the water management when the pond is vacated. That too is a standard issue, part of the process. We're just not there yet. So I just wanted to specifically touch on those two.
I have a few more to add to that list. So just to tie us up, and I won't belabor this, I'm also supportive of the use. I like the view corridor capitalization, and I am cautiously optimistic that we can get there on the massing, but the safety, the vehicular, the everything, but. I am looking forward to more details in future iterations. I would encourage the modeling to incorporate those 360 view, elevation changes, everything in the next process, because that will allow us at the concept plan to say, right now, my knee jerk is 11 stories ain't gonna happen. But if 11 stories in your parcel looks like 8 stories in another parcel or 6 stories in another parcel due to the elevation, then it's a consideration. And that, I don't remember, Mr. Herring, I think that was your earlier point. And that's really why we have waivers. Everything isn't always equal, and sometimes there's a little give and take, and that's one of the reasons why Dublin, especially Bridge Park, is so well designed today, is because there was a little bit of that give and take. The items that Mr. Suplak hit on, engineering study going to come. Traffic studies aren't always guaranteed. In this case, it would be a necessity. Additionally, we had signs mentioned. Sign plan would have to come forward if they don't meet the someone mentioned before, we're pretty restrictive on signs. If they don't meet that, then they have to come back with a full sign plan. And then stormwater management and all of the engineering requirements that would have to happen, along with, they mentioned before, circulation, site circulation, whether that's vehicular or pedestrian, needs to come back in order for us to see it through. Again, we're at the crayons on paper stage, and then we go to the Duplo blocks, then we go to the Lego blocks, and we're actually looking at something that is modeled that we can really, really understand. A lot of us are not, some of us are, but a lot of us are not professional architects, but we have experience in understanding the language and the construction and hopefully do a good job at bringing good projects to the City of Dublin. The last couple of comments that I have, this is a public process, so we heard from a lot of people today. The construction is a concern. That's one that personally I have thought of in the past, and it wasn't on the forefront of my mind, especially where we're dealing with such a contentious intersection. So that construction process has to be incredibly well. It's not the same as Dublin, Bridge Street, Bridge Park area 3 years ago, because now we have additional vehicular traffic, we have additional draw, and so we have to be incredibly sensitive. And, we've worked together, Mr. Hunter, over the course of years, and it's in your best interest to keep that as minimally impactful as possible. And then just the comment before, I think Ms. Harder made it on community engagement. There were a couple of individuals not included in that. You've always been very good to consider that and make sure that that circle expands outside of its current standing to make sure that others are involved in the process. So overall, as this is a non-binding, this is a informal feedback, is there anything that you don't have clarity on from the commission as far as feedback this evening?
No, I think we're great. Honestly, I heard a lot tonight, but the thing that I really was happy to hear is that everyone else thinks that some connection north across 161 is as important as we thought it was, because that was the one thing I honestly wasn't quite sure of. And there are a lot of people in our office that thought it was without some way of advancing a better way to get across 161, that this just didn't work. And so that was a great takeaway from tonight, but a lot of great conversation, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. And thank you all for coming out. If you'd like to stick around, we have one more case this evening.
I just wanted to wrap up my thought and just say thank you very much. You've given us some great things to think about that I think will actually make it even better. And as I was running down the list of comments from the residents, I feel very confident we'll be able to satisfy all of their concerns. So again, thank you. We appreciate your input.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. And we look forward, there is, yes, the model. It was helpful this evening. Thank you. Nice. And we do look forward to welcoming Cameron Mitchell Business to the City of Dublin, understanding that we have a few more steps in the process, but if we can come together, I'm sure we'll end up with an excellent project. All right. Welcome. We have a new case this evening and a new case presenter this evening. Case item number 3, Neurotransitional Rehabilitation Center at 6640 Perimeter Drive, 22-123 CU and 22-126 FDP, conditional use and final development plan. This application is a request for text modification and conditional use to permit a specialty hospital use and the construction of a 1-story neurotransitional rehabilitation center on a 1.98 acre site, zone planned unit commercial district, Riverside North, sub area A1. The site is northeast of the intersection of Perimeter Drive with Hospital Drive. Thank you, Mr. Hounshell and Ms. Holt. And then Jenny, I'll turn time over to you for introduction.
Yes, as you noted, we have a new presenter, and I had mentioned a couple meetings ago that staff is working with the consultant team to help us with our caseload and reviewing cases. So this is Liz Fields. She's with McBride Dale Clarion out of Cincinnati. Greg Dale, you may recall him doing a lot of training. They work in the same office. So, and she was previously a case planner for Mason, Ohio, as sort of a contract planner for them through her firm. So she has lots of experience. So this is her first night with us tonight, and we're excited to have her. So welcome.
Well, welcome. We have my company has an office in Mason, so welcome, welcome.
Yes, I worked with Mason for about 8 years as a contract planner. For about 6 of those years, I was half-time in their office. And pretty much did all of their planning and zoning reviews and planning commission presentations. I also started my career in the public sector, so this is comfortable for me. But thank you all for having me, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you. So yes, tonight I am here to present on the Neurotransitional Rehabilitation Center. This project has been in front of you before, starting back in 2004 with the initial preliminary development plan and rezoning. And then it came before you just a few months ago for the informal review. But tonight we are here with the final development plan, along with a conditional use and proposed text amendments to the development text. So this is a kind of a 3-part thing tonight, but this was the final step in the process. Here is the proposed site. It is located on Perimeter Drive, just east of Dublin Cancer Center and about 1,500 feet west of Avery Murfield Drive. As you can see, it is a vacant site right now. These are shots looking from both the south and looking south from the planned commercial district and then from Perimeter Drive. It's kind of hard to orient yourself on a vacant lot. But it is vacant, and the site itself is 1.98 acres. This parcel is located in a Planned Commerce District. It is in subarea A1 of the Riverside North Planned Commerce District. In that PCD, it defaults to uses that are permitted in the suburban office and institutional district, along with financial service and institutional uses, and daycares. So specialty hospitals are not currently permitted in the PCD, and that's why they are proposing some text amendments, which we'll talk about tonight. Again, just some project history. The preliminary development plan and the rezoning came due in 2004. And then in 2021, the board approved, I guess it would be city council approved, adding specialty hospitals in the SO district with specific standards. So that is part of kind of the review tonight, is if this proposal meets those specific standards that were adopted for specialty hospitals. And then in May of this year, the informal review, there was some general favor of the use on the proposed just under 2-acre lot, if it was specifically limited only to neurotransitional uses. So the applicant has addressed that comment, and we'll go over that in a second. So as I mentioned, we have these 3 applications within, I guess, sub-applications. The text modifications, they are proposing 3 kind of specific text modifications to the development text. And then they were requesting conditional use approval for the proposed specialty hospital use, and then the final development plan. So for the text modifications, they are requesting to add specialty hospitals to the approved list within the within this plan development, but specifying that that is limited to only neurotransitional facilities. So then if this was adopted, if you all approve that modification, then no other specialty hospitals would be permitted within this plan development text. The specific standards then would apply. And so these are the specific standards under the SO conditional use requirements for specialty hospitals. So these do apply to the proposed use. The only one they don't comply with is the minimum 3-acre site. As stated, their existing site or their proposed site is 1.98 acres, but they do comply with the rest of those standards. The second request to the text modification is for fencing. Currently, the text states that only daycares within this planned commerce district are allowed to have fencing. So they're proposing to add that neurotransitional facilities may also have fencing as they're proposing an outdoor recreation area for their patients. And then lastly, this lighting is more of a housekeeping item. The current development text states that all lighting should be the shoebox style lighting, but the project hasn't developed with shoebox style lighting. And so really almost all of the projects currently within this project are in violation of this development text. So this would just clean up that text and allow the developer to install the lights that are consistent with the surrounding properties. And then moving into the final development plan application, again, 1.9 acre site that was reviewed and discussed in the informal. The building itself is a 14,400 square foot building. It is located close to and along Perimeter Drive, as you can see. That is technically the kind of the rear of the building that's facing Perimeter Drive, but they have addressed that with the building elevations. The proposal has added a patient access point with a porte cochere at the front of the site on the north side of the building. That's where that orange star is located. So that is the proposed porte cochere. The access to the site is off of Perimeter Drive from an existing shared access drive. So they will not be cutting in a new access to Perimeter Drive. They will be locating access off of that existing drive. They do propose a kind of combined dumpster and generator enclosure that is located in that dark blue box. That also includes a covered outdoor area for the patients that utilize the outdoor recreation area. The kind of green bubbled area is the location of that outdoor recreation area. So that area will be fenced, but is located in the side and the rear of the site. There is also a public shared use path along the eastern side of the site. Connection to this path was discussed at the informal meeting, and that is part of our conditions of approval tonight. A specific connection point and how that's going to be done has not been fully worked out between the applicant and staff, but they have committed to having that conversation. And then, landscaping that is proposed does meet our code and development text requirements. They are providing parking lot screening, street trees, and a variety of deciduous and evergreen shrubs. And they are providing the required berm along Perimeter Drive along with the street trees. Here's the axonomic view of the proposed building from Perimeter Drive. So again, you're looking at basically the rear of the building, but what you will see from Perimeter Drive. We will look at the building elevations in a second, but they have added additional fenestration and details to this facade to ensure that it is compatible with the surrounding properties and doesn't look like a rear of a building. They have designed the roof so it hides the HVAC units and all the mechanical equipment on the roof. And then you can see that porte cochere kind of off the back side here. That's the porte cochere back there. Here is the actual elevations of the building. So you can see this south elevation. This is the Perimeter Drive elevation. They do have a stone water table, but the majority of the project is brick. And then the middle bump out and the end bump outs are also stone. They have added these 4 dormers on this elevation, and then along with their regular window openings to articulate the elevation as well. And then this is the north front elevation that's facing the parking lot. Again, very similar design and materials, but you see the porte cochere that's kind of sticking out from the building there. And then this is the elevation from the west and east elevation. So again, they have these sort of stone bump outs on each end, and then, but very similar designs in terms of building materials, articulation, and then again, you get a good view of the porte cochere there. We're going to zoom into some of the details here. So this is a detail of the dormer. It is proposed to be hardy board painted white. This is the fence detail. It is proposed to be a 5-foot tall black aluminum fence with these stone pilasters at regular intervals. These are the views of the dumpster and generator enclosure. So this bottom one is looking from the parking lot. So you can see the dumpster enclosure to the left with the bigger doors and the generator enclosure to the, basically in the middle. And then the covered outdoor area for the residents or the patients on the right-hand side. And then this above view is looking straight at that shelter area. You can see that the materials are proposed to be stone and brick to match the building. And then we do have the material board. So the physical material board is somewhere. You guys have that. But the primary materials are the black dimensional asphalt shingles, dark red brick, the concrete and stone accents, limestone water table and focal points, and then the white paint on the hardy board in those accent areas. Okay, so to kind of sum up everything, they are requesting to modify the development text for those 3 specific things, to add the specialty hospitals for neurological rehabilitation only, to permit fencing for this proposed use, and then to permit the heritage style lighting fixtures. The criteria for the text amendments staff considers them to be met. Specifically, there are no violations or inconsistencies with the community plan, and the project is consistent with surrounding development. For the conditional use review, staff finds that all the conditional use criteria have been met. And then for the final development plan criteria, staff has found that all criteria have either been met with text modifications or met with conditions of approval. And those the text modifications. So finally, summing it up, staff recommends approval of all the 3 text modifications that are proposed, approval of the conditional use application, and approval of the final development plan with the 4 conditions of approval that are listed in the staff report. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or go into more detail about those conditions if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to do questions for this one together. So if the applicant's here, I'd like to invite you up if you have a statement or a presentation that you'd like to make. And if you could press the button there. Yes, you are.
And you need name and address.
Yes, please.
Scott Keen, 4714 Gettysburg Road, Mechanicsburg, PA, 17055. And we were here a little bit ago. First, I'd just like to give thank you to the team because they've worked incredibly with us and we've really tried to create exactly what everybody is looking for the community in this area. So it's been a pleasure working with Dublin. We've had challenges in other states that were not as pleasurable, I'll say. But thank you. We're excited to develop this neurotransitional rehab. It's for Ohio Health and our joint venture. The design concept is specifically for brain injury and spinal cord injury, as we talked about. Currently, there is a gap in the healthcare continuum for these patients locally, so we're looking to fill that gap with Ohio Health, and being very close to Methodist Hospital really helps these patients be successful. So that's why this site was really looked at initially as an optimal site, so that if they have medical appointments or they have needs, you have hospital right there and you have the ability to connect with the healthcare professionals. The design has given a lot of thought to these patients. We designed this nationally, so we've worked with this. We are also in inpatient rehab, long-term acute care hospitals. We deal with these patients on all levels of care. And this is where we're extending nationally now with these neurotransitional rehab centers specifically for brain injury and spinal cord injury. So I'd like to open it up to any questions, or do you have any statements, Joe? But thoughts about where we've gone, design concepts, et cetera. We've tried to hit every aspect. And as I said, the staffers have been incredible to work with. So thank you.
Thank you. Looking to the commission for questions for either staff or the applicant. Mr. Schneer.
Applicant or staff and applicant, I assume asphalt shingles are permitted material in this?
Yes, they are. They recommended, it's the preferred roofing material in this development.
And channeling our absent Commissioner Warren, is the brick, you couldn't tell from the sample, but will it be fully dimensional?
Brick's veneer.
It is a veneer, or is it?
Veneer, both the stone and the brick will be a veneer. That's what's designed at this time. And I apologize, the architect we came here with last time, he had a last minute health emergency, so he's not here, so I'm gonna try to field your questions best as I can. I'm on the construction side, so.
If I could have you state your name and address for the record, please.
Nick Belfer with Select, 4714 Gettysburg Road, Mechanicsburg, PA 17055.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sukulik.
Clarification, when you're saying that brick veneer, a full brick can still be a veneer, is this thin brick or is this?
Like a split face?
So the brick is a thin brick?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Harder.
Yes, I just had a couple. First of all, with staff, they come back again for signage. Is that later?
And just for clarification, so the zoning allows for certain signage, so only if they go beyond that would they come back for?
Because before that, I just thought I'd ask the question if what the name of your what would be on the sign? Does it say Ohio Health? Does it say, yes,
and
sorry.
let
I'm going to clarify actually, unless you wanted to. They don't have a sign approved, so that's the condition number one, is that the sign will come back to the planning commission.
And Mr. Boggs, if you can talk to what's within our purview and what is not within our purview.
Right. So this is my first chance to talk tonight.
Yes. I didn't want you to get off the.
Thanks.
I was this close. So in terms of what we review for signs, our standards have dimensional and location components, lighting, et cetera. But based on precedent from the Supreme Court applying the First Amendment, we can't really get into saying what can or cannot be on the sign in terms of content. So that's what our limitation is.
Thank you, Mr. Boggs. Ms. Harder.
Okay, so you haven't put out a name. I guess that's what I'm hearing. Okay. Then, and this could be for staff as well too. Have you contacted the Washington Fire Department? Are they concerned about any increase in numbers of runs due to a new facility? Or have you all had a contact with the local fire department, the Washington Township Fire Department?
The fire department was part of the review process for the application, and they don't have any concerns as far as I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
And I would extend that because it came up in our initial discussion, well, not 2004, but May discussions to police. This would be the only in this stretch corridor, the only overnight facility. And so were they part of the review process as well? And if so, did they provide feedback?
They were not part of the review process, and I can let the applicant kind of address what they're proposing for their safety procedures.
Thank you. Other questions from the commission? Ms. Harder.
On that line, I thought with safety, I thought that was coming from Dublin Methodist.
Yes, so we have security measures that we use within the facility itself. Everybody's crisis intervention trained. Everything is secured access, delayed egress. We also have cameras. And then what we would do is we'd work with our partnership, and because their location is so close, we'd work out a purchase service agreement for shared security services that they would be able to address any issues that came up that required that type of security.
Thank you. Other questions?
On that
Ms.
note, would they be on site or just called if there was a situation? Or have you?
The discussions so far have been that they would most likely include us in their typical rounds. We wouldn't physically have somebody on site for a campus of 12 patients, but we'd be accessible. And there is other partnerships. We've tied the security cameras directly into the partnership too. So those things are possibilities that they'd have full visibility.
Mr. Chinook.
Thank you. Just for clarification, 2 questions. So the lighting change, obviously, we're still hitting the foot candles and the required counts with the new lighting.
Yes, correct. The only issue with the lighting plan was the actual physical
Look at the fixture.
proposal, but the photometric plan that they proposed showed that heritage style lighting that met all the requirements. So they just needed to change the text to make sure that they could actually use that type of lighting.
Okay. Second question on the fencing. The fencing would be just limited to this site. We're not changing the fencing beyond just this location, correct?
Correct. The change to the text would now say that fencing is only allowed with daycares and neurotransitional specialty hospitals. So it basically just for those 2 uses.
Oh, for the use. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chinook. Other questions? Mr. Way.
Excuse me, have you discussed where the connection to the multi-use path might go with the applicant? Or maybe that's a question, I'm just trying to figure out where's the logical place for that to happen?
I know discussions have taken place, and I think I'll either let Sarah or Michael handle that.
Mr. Hendershot, welcome back.
So we're just going to pull up the site plan. So we had been talking with the applicant. It seems like there may be an opportunity to have a connection from kind of the fenced in area for, patrons of that area to be able to access the shared use path that's running north and south. The applicants indicated there is a flood routing path along that side that needs to be contended with, so it may make grading challenges or challenging in that area. So that is where, and maybe the applicant can speak to that. But that's something that we're continuing to work with the applicant on as far as that specific location.
Thank you, Mr. Hendershot.
And so let me just ask more about the question. So the purpose of the connection, so it's for people within the facility to get to the path versus just people that are, like maybe it's a visitor that parked and wants to go for a walk. They don't want to have to go in the building, come back out and go to the path. So the nature of that connection.
Right. Yeah, I think we had seen that as potentially an opportunity or an amenity for folks that are at that facility to be able to utilize that existing path.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendershot. Other questions? One question that I had, do you have what the height, and perhaps it was in our documentation, but what the height of the generator versus, generator trash building is? Okay.
Joe Walker, EMH&T, 5500 New Albany Road. I don't know it offhand, but I believe it is less than 14 feet. I know it's closer to 12 feet, but I don't know the exact number. I'd be happy to follow up with staff once we get that.
Thank you. And then staff question following up on that. In the suburban office code that I could find, the statement is the exterior facade materials and architectural design of all accessory structures shall be coordinated with those of the principal building. Is there any part of code that I'm missing as far as what primary, secondary type materials ought to be, what the design ought to look like on one of these accessory structures other than it needs to be complementary?
Not that I'm aware of, but also the other staff are going to be much more knowledgeable on your code.
Okay. If you find something, please let me
She's
know. And then the other question, I imagine because of the generator nature, the bollards that are in front of that, I imagine that's why they are there. Has there been any discussion on integrating those into the building rather than having them exterior to the building facade?
Are you referring to the columns for the overhang or or the actual generator enclosure?
Not the columns, the bollards
The
that are on
bollards
the
in front.
back side. So,
Near the trash.
yeah. So can you bring up this?
That was the trash. 18.0.
Right.
It's 10 feet.
It's item 6. It's the back side of that building. So you can kind of see the bollards on that one, but there's one view that all it is a stone wall with 3 bollards on one of those walls.
Says it's the north elevation.
Oh, 4, sorry.
North elevation.
Thank you. That's south elevation. Oh, no, it is north.
They're like 1, 2, 3, like.
So
I don't have that exact view on this presentation. That's the issue. Can I
got it.
bring up the Apple?
So gentlemen, I don't know if you can see, but this is,
Sheet A2, drawing 7. North elevation of your trash.
thank you.
Detail
North side.
10 feet tall.
Thank you.
And the answer to your question is the text does not talk about accessory structures versus primary structures. It just talks about permitted materials. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. So
The bollards are mostly there just to protect the wall, especially because it's a dumpster enclosure, any truck that's backing in or out, just to protect the structure. That's the main intent of that.
so it's more for the trash enclosure than it is for the generator itself?
Yeah,
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for staff or the applicant? Mr. Supala.
Question for staff. I don't see it in the text, but we can agree we don't typically, are not typically fond of thin brick. Is that permitted here?
In this development text, this was from some time ago, and our standards are a little bit different. So what they're proposing would be permitted. Again, it's from many years ago, so.
Got it. Thank you.
Has there been any discussion on materials other than thin brick?
At this point, no, but we can definitely look into it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Final questions from the commission for either staff or the applicant? All right, thank you very much. So we will then, have we received any public comment on this item and anyone from the public here too? All right, we will move on to deliberation. So if I could start, we're going to bounce around a little bit. Mr. Way, if we could start with you this evening.
Okay. So I am looking at, so I support the text modifications. I support the conditional use and the final development plan.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Ms. Harder.
I agree also, but I'm glad that you're going to be looking into the thicker brick and so forth. I think that'll be important. And I'm really glad that you're thinking about coming here and look forward to it.
Thank you, Ms. Harder. Mr. Supalack.
Relative to, good with the text modifications, good with the conditions. Ultimately, we kind of articulated, I'm not especially satisfied with the thin brick. I would advocate for a full brick. There's just, even when you do it, everybody knows because they can pick up on something that's, I'm going to say unnatural, and it's the depth of the windows and things like that, right? It'll come across as flat. So I would continue to advocate for that. I don't know if we have any legs to stand on though relative to the current code.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Mr. Schneer.
Well, I'll echo that and raise the same question. I'd like to not see thin brick if it's within our purview. But if it's in the code, and then so be it. I had, I hate to bore the entire commission with this, but I submitted a couple modifications to the verbiage, so to staff, and I'll just read it. It's D, the specialty hospital use. I propose that we strike the words levels of and strike the words to patients and specifically. So it would read specialty hospital use for neurological rehabilitation care, and then pick up with excluding drug substance rehabilitation and add a period after D. So, it's just syntax.
Yep.
And otherwise, I'm fine with everything.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Mr. Chinook.
I don't have anything else to add. I think I approve I think the text modifications are great. I will say that I really appreciate you guys coming. I think you've done a great job of, you heard our comments. You came back with a much improved building design. I like the residential feel that it has. I think it's going to be very nice in the space. So I just want to make sure you guys, heard our appreciation for coming back to us with a much improved building design in sight.
Thank you, Mr. Chinook. I'm also supportive of the use. I'm supportive of the location. I'm a little hesitant just on the public safety portion, especially considering police were not engaged in the discussion. So that makes me just want to make sure that the applicant works with public safety to ensure police and fire are. And then I also echo the full depth brick. It's if you were willing to do the full depth brick, you would have our encouragement to do so. The other items that give me some pause, the generator structure is very, very plain. Single material, has an eave over the one. The bollards kind of stick out. It looks very how about it looks like what it is, and it doesn't try to look like anything else. And so I would challenge you to see if there are opportunities to make that a little bit more complementary and maybe not detract from the use. And then, the bollards, if those could be, I understand protecting the building with a generator and power and safety and that sort of thing. I would have thought that the bollards would be more for that use. If they're there specifically to protect the building, I can understand. There's always a little bit of creativity that can go into bollards and make them both useful, but also not detracting. And, trash cans are ugly. They're a necessary evil, but there are different ways we can disguise them, like putting them in an enclosure. And so I would encourage you to look at different ways to make that even more complementary. You've done a great job with designing the building. It has some nice give and take in the elevations, in the way that the windows play with the overhangs and that sort of thing. And so I think that you could carry that over to this accessory structure very easily. So I'm going to look back. We got a little muddy there in discussions. We did have the request for looking into looking into full depth brick over thin brick. If that would be something that would be acceptable to you, we could write that into conditions.
Can I add that they're also doing thin stone too?
Yes.
So are we saying both of those building materials or just brick?
The thin stone is common.
Okay.
The split face, I mean, it's basically a cultured stone, but the thin brick is.
I just want to clarify that it's just the brick.
Yeah. So if that would be something that would be acceptable to you, understanding that right now the development text allows for thin brick, but it's really a better product to go full depth. And so if that would be acceptable, we could write that into the conditions that you work with staff to investigate the use of full depth brick.
Agreed.
And then I don't know that we would necessarily need to write into conditions, but if you could take into consideration some type of dressing up the accessory structure. Are there other items that I missed, Mr. Supalak, other than the T's crossed and I's dotted? Looking to the rest of the commissioners. Mr. Way?
Are you referring to the bollards still?
Oh, yeah, well, the
I just-
accessory structure, the accessory structure and the bollards.
I just want to clarify, the plan shows the bollards are inside the enclosure to prevent the dumpster from being pushed up against the wall, back wall. Oh, it says north elevation, but and it doesn't match what the plan shows. So I'm confused about actually what is,
And it
being
could just be the resource who is going to be here tonight is not here. So
so they may actually be in the closure.
even better,
And
even
the-
better.
yeah, and the label's wrong on the elevation.
Yeah. And again, I don't necessarily think that needs to be a condition of approval. It's not something, I mean, I'm one voice. I don't think it would be something that we would say must happen, but it would be really, really nice if it did. Am I missing anything? Okay. All right. Looking to you, do you have any items that you'd like clarity on this evening?
We're good, thank you.
Okay, and then if you could review condition number 5, that we have added that the applicant shall explore the use of full depth brick with staff. Is that
Yes.
acceptable?
Yes, thank you.
All right, seeing as we have the applicant willing to accept condition number 5, I will entertain a motion for the 3 text modifications.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Way.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Ms. Beal.
Ms. Harder? Yes.
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 Mr. Supalack?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes.
Mr. Schneer?
Yes.
All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the conditional use.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Way.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Schneer. Ms. Beal.
Mr. Shinak?
Yes.
Mr. Schneer?
Yes.
Mr. Supalack?
Yes.
Ms. Harder? Yes. Mr. Way?
Yes.
Ms. Call?
Yes. And then finally, the final development plan with 5 conditions as presented on the screen and discussed this evening. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Supalack. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Way. Ms. Beal?
Mr. Way?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Shinak?
Yes.
Ms. Harder? Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Beal. Gentlemen, thank you for coming this evening.
I don't think you called me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't call you, Mr. Schneer.
Yes.
Thanks, Lance, for keeping us on our toes. Gentlemen, thank you for coming forward this evening. You highlighted before that this is kind of a void in not just Dublin, but kind of the greater Northwest Columbus area. So we certainly thank you for bringing this type of use into the city of Dublin. And our residents who patronize it, I'm sure, thank you as well. So we welcome you to Dublin and we look forward to seeing groundbreaking. All right, Ms. Roush, communications. I'll turn some time over to you and then I have a minor one.
Okay, I just have a couple things. So thank you to Kathy, I believe, attended our evening of gratitude last night. So thank you for coming to that. That was a really nice event. I also have a reminder on here about your cybersecurity training. And if you have any issues or concerns or don't know what to do, please let me know. Yes, to make sure that that's completed by November 25th. And then we are finalizing our meeting dates for next year with the hope of having, well, it will be before you in December for you to vote on that. I will provide that ahead of the meeting though, that way you have plenty of time to look at it, and then we'll include it again with your packet. Just so that you have ample time to look at it and make sure there's no issues, but the goal of being approving that at our December meeting. So that's all I have.
So the only one that I have is a 404 link on our website. So if you Google Dublin, Ohio code and you click on it, it goes to an error page. If we have IT, they can redirect. And so I recommend just putting in some type of redirect.
I think I found,
We have a new website.
I was going to say, I think they're working
Yes,
through it because I found others.
Yeah, and it's there, I can find it.
Yeah.
But that 404, it's very easy to forward a page. And so if they put a different route, then residents or anyone doesn't get an error message when visiting that page.
And I would just add that if anyone is looking for the Dublin codified ordinances online, you can also go directly to American Legal Publishing.
And even if we add back in the page that used to be and say the code has moved, you can now access at and the link, so it's not just a blind forward.
You probably already figured this out, but I think when you click on the ARB link, it goes to P and Z and not ARB.
Some kinks to be worked out. So, well, yes, but yeah, if you find other items like that, please let us know and we'll, again, we've done an inventory and initial, we have a list too, and that may already be on the list. Yeah, it's a big, robust change for us for the whole city. So, but please feel free to share that. That way we can double check that everything's addressed. So thank you.
Other communications from the commission?
I have a question on the thin brick. If we want to modify that,
This is just in their development text. And so because it's in their development text, we have to ask them if they'd be willing. We can't just like yank and hold them to a higher standard.
but if we wanted to change it though, from a city.
But
So, I mean,
Right, sorry.
the city would be able to initiate an application it would essentially be a change in their zoning text. So they would have to they and any other property owners within the affected sub area or planned district would have to get notice and the opportunity to come in and be heard on that to specify brick, meaning full depth brick rather than thin. I believe that, since these concerns started to be voiced more regularly as we see planned development text proposals come in, we're specifying full depth brick, at least moving forward.
So really, we're future-proofing, and so much of the city is done under development text PUDs, and it's not falling into the baseline code. We kind of have a little bit more flexibility in the future because that whole design process is kind of a give and take. It's just on these ones where that's why it's the sensitivity to, would you be willing? If you would, we're not going to make it a concrete condition of, we'd really, really like it.
Yeah, kudos to the applicant for agreeing to have that included as a condition, that they would at least explore it. Because as you point out, it can make a better product in terms of the dimensionality of your windows and other architectural features.
All right, anything else, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for spending another Thursday evening. That was not me.